I just got out of a government town hall meeting, and I just want to tell you everything that was just discussed because the last 30 minutes was the most depressing shit I've heard in a while. There are going to be more layoffs coming, and it doesn't matter your grade. It doesn't matter that you're over your probationary period. Your job is on the line. And this is fucking scary, dude, because they announced that in some agencies, they're going to be trying to cut it by 50%. And they didn't specify which agencies, but that is, depending on it, tens of thousands of people. And this is going to get to the point where the government's going to collapse. Because you pair that with, if these tax cuts go through and they only benefit the ultra wealthy and they raise your taxes, they gut Medicaid, they do all of these things, there's not going to be enough revenue for the government to be sustainable. And honestly, red states are going to be decimated because they are welfare states, not only from the social programs and everything, but because blue states are overtaxed so that we give our money to red states to bail them out every year because they're not self-sufficient. Schedule F, which is through another executive order, reclassifies certain employees and strips them of their protections and rights. That is another tool that they're using for the reduction in force. So they're going to target people that are possibly affected by that, as well as newer employees, even if you're past your probationary period, when you already have your federal statute protections and your appeal rights and everything. But again, the party of criminals love to just steamroll over laws. They are getting rid of hundreds of field offices across the country. They're also simultaneously saying how the Treasury directive is going to basically be that people need to start returning to the office. The same offices they're getting rid of. Just it's a clown show, man. It is. How do you say that out loud? Hey, we're getting rid of the offices to get you back to the office. Dude, productivity is going to drop. It's going to start a recession. People are going to be spending more money on childcare. They're going to be spending more money on their commute. Also, they can work on their laptop that they very well could do from home. Transit subsidies, taxes are going to rise and everything because as a part of a benefit for a federal employee, you get transit subsidies, you get child care subsidies, you get all these things. And Republicans better not shed a fucking tear because that's your private sector benefits, is it not? Thought so. Democrats are doing absolutely nothing. Why is it always left to like three people like Jasmine Crockett, AOC, Bernie Sanders to just carry the weight of the entire Democrat Party? And yet simultaneously, those are all people nobody advocates for to like run for president. They always want some fucking deadbeat that's not doing anything, that's bought off and paid for by corporations. The same ones privatizing our government and stealing our jobs. It just makes me so angry.
All right, you guys, so this is going to be my last video for a few minutes because I've really got to start motoring on getting, I got to get all these plants planted today too. So, my best friend works for one of the largest HR firms in the United States. They have a lot of employees on their sheets. And we had a discussion this morning, and I trust what she says. I want you guys to think about something. So, the word on the street is 1.2 million federal employees are going to be let go by March 13th. That's a very important date. You guys do realize that the CR that our government is currently running on expires on March 14th, right? So there's that. Here's the other thing. What do you think is going to happen to our economy when 1.2 million people are unemployed? What do you think is going to happen? Y'all need to think about this. And when you sit there and say, oh, well, it's wasteful spending, and Sporkfoot Green said that they don't bring any revenue. No, not all federal employees are going to bring in revenue. But we do have to have them for our government to run efficiently. Not like DOGE says, but efficiently. And I also want you guys to think about something else. All of these cuts to USAID are now starting to come back and bite us in the ass. There are diseases ravaging countries all across the globe, and it's just going to be a matter of time before it ends up here. You guys just think about that, okay? Okay.
Y'all, working for the federal government these days is basically like the Hunger Games. You're just waiting to get chosen to get you up out of here. Because I was laid off from my federal position, and I mean, I don't work there anymore, so I will just say what agency it was. I was laid off from the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and then but I already knew that the layoffs were coming. After the election results and Donald Trump won that election, I was like, yeah, it's a wrap. I'm going to start looking for other jobs because I already knew that was coming. So I was laid off. A week later, I started a different position as a legal analyst in a different government job, and now that position has been rescinded as well. And I'm like, okay, at this point, I'm done with the federal government until we get a change of administration, because this is crazy. So I'm going back to being a private sector mommy because A, y'all not about to keep wasting my time, and B, I'm never going to go to the office in Washington, D.C. I live in Florida.
Guys, we haven't seen anything yet. The pain that's about to come in the labor market is going to be biblical. The GDP should fall for a second straight quarter, which would announce to the world we're in a recession, which we already know. And then if companies can't raise prices, they're going to get their money somehow. And guess what's the only other way for them to easily get money? Firing and laying off more employees. So let's mix that with what Donald Trump and Elon have already done. Let's mix that with Walgreens, UPS, all the companies that have already downsized. Amazon's going to be looking to do this. Anybody in the tech industry is going to be looking to do this. And what does that leave the labor market looking like a year from now? Terrible. Because we have nothing. We have no social safety nets. And we have no potential new industry in America. The only potential industry they're even talking about is AI. So you better believe they want to create the social chaos they're about to create with creating this many unemployed, this many impoverished, this many disabled, hurting, and hungry. They want what's coming. They want us to feel the pain. I mean, I would tell you, even if you're living comfortably now, I would live like I'm below poverty for the next little bit. Because I'm telling you, we know one thing. Corporations are going to get their money somehow. It's coming.
I saw that Intel made a recent announcement that they were doing a reduction in force of about 20% of its workforce. Its workforce is 109,000 people, in-person staff. So that is roughly 21,000 jobs. I also saw that UPS plans to cut about 20,000 employees. I know this is kind of old news, but that's going to be one of the largest in U.S. history. So then I decided to hop over to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics to see where we're standing so far this year. It looks like 1.8 million people were laid off or discharged in February 2025 alone. That brings us to 3.5 million layoffs and discharges in 2025 so far. That's pretty big. So far, just January and February is what the data has been reported. Layoffs and discharges total 3.5 million, and that is 2.7% higher than the same period in 2024. In February 25, that data that I had given, so the 1.5 million, that looks like that stands for about 1.1% of all employed people. That's huge. So when I dig a little bit deeper, the layoff and discharge rate was highest in the professional services industry in February. Second to that was construction, and then information, leisure and hospitality, retail, trade, transportation and utilities, manufacturing, wholesale trade, financial activities, education and health services, mining and logging, and then government. So again, a lot of us think that all of this is happening in the government sector right now, but it's not. It's happening a ton in the private and public sector as well. And so just something to think about. And if you're an employer and you're thinking about doing this, I come alongside organizations and help them determine who should be RIFed and at what frequency, and make sure that it's set up appropriately so that you're legally protected, and then employees that are impacted are taken care of. So reach out. I've got an HR firm, Salt and Light Advisors, and we're happy to help.
130 companies plus are laying off in May. Here is a list of some companies laying off in May. For a full list of layoffs, go to warntracker.com. Govt.com. Companies are required to give a 90-day notice. If you are not preparing for the ultimate recession, please do so. Here is a list of the companies.
Someone might say, well, isn't this what always happens? A new president comes in, the former people are wiped out, and new people are appointed.
Not at all. This is really unprecedented, and it's important to understand why. Political appointees get removed and replaced by presidents all the time. This is the top layer of leadership, but beneath them and the core of the government are the civil service. These are people who have developed expertise over often decades of experience working across administrations of both parties, and whose jobs are protected by civil service laws that have been on the books since the late 19th century.
I worked in corporate America for over 40 plus years, and I know a hostile takeover when I see it. Donald Trump is doing a takeover of the United States government, and he is not taking it over to operate it as a going concern. Trump is going to break down every department, and he has his liquidation team in place. So they're going to strip down all these departments, like the Veterans Administration, like the Social Security Administration, and on and on and on. And once they get these departments stripped down, which means massive layoffs of employees and stripped down to the bare minimum, they're going to put those functions that those departments do out for bid for private enterprise to take over those functions. So private companies will bid on running Social Security. They will bid on running the Veterans Administration, and so on and so on and so on. The post office, that's the simplest example. People like UPS, FedEx, and who have you will bid on taking over the functions of an operation like the post office. Only one issue. These operations are profit making. So the efficiency you get from having these being government departments will be gone, because now there will be shareholder interest and profit making as the goal. So don't be naive and think these things are just in search of waste, fraud, and abuse. These are stripping these agencies down to the bare bones so they can be put out for competitive bidding for the wealthy, the well-heeled, the CEOs, and everyone else to take them over, and then we will get the fleecing. And once this stuff is gone, even if Trump is gone, you won't be able to put it back together again as a government function, because he will have achieved his goal of monetizing the United States federal government, and the government that will be left will be nothing but a shell.
Country is being looted. It's being asset stripped and sold off in pieces. And just as they did in the global south, they're going to leave behind a population that's drowning in debt. They're going to leave behind a government that is incapable of addressing the needs of the population, and a security apparatus that exists solely to suppress dissent. The same corporate oligarchs, the same financial institutions and military contractors that drained the global south of their resources are now doing the same to the West. This is what I've been talking about for ages now. The same economic policies that left entire nations in the global south impoverished, the same mechanisms of debt enslavement, the same manufactured crises and wars of destabilization and so on, those are now being turned inward.
This first 100 days of the Trump administration will go down in history as the greatest grift in the history of our economy in terms of the amount of money stolen and the size of it over the shortest period. Just some data here. Trump-affiliated entities have made at least $300 million in trading fees. The Trump family's net worth has increased by $3 billion or $1 billion a month since he took office. Just some timeline. The Trump coin launched on a Friday night under cover of dark with all the news about the inauguration. By 3 a.m. on Sunday, it was valued at more than $70 billion, and there were a small number of investors who made large investments on a Friday. Maybe they got a tip or something. They made tens, if not hundreds of millions, and then over the course of the next couple weeks, about 800,000 smaller investors lost billions. This market manipulation, this what would technically be called insider trading by the SEC, we'll never know because on April 8th, Trump's deputy attorney general ordered the DOJ's crypto fraud investigation arm to disband. Trump posted on Truth Social, "This is a great time to buy Donald Trump media at 9:37 a.m. Between 1 and 1:10 p.m., there was a huge increase in bullish zero-day S&P 500 call options. And then just 8 minutes later, Trump announced a 90-day pause on all of his tariffs, and the market soared almost 10%, one of the biggest one-day gains in history. So someone knew what was going on.
Of course they do. He calls them.
That's called insider trading. The market gained $4 trillion while Trump media closed up 23%, increased his net worth by $415 million. On April 23rd, Trump announced that the top holders of the Trump coin would win an exclusive dinner with him, and the coin surged over 60%. Just 58 wallets made more than $10 million apiece, totaling approximately $1.1 billion in gains. Meanwhile, 800,000 wallets of mostly smaller holders have lost money on their Trump coin. And it gets worse. Now the kids went on it. World Liberty Financial, a crypto firm run by Trump's sons, Eric and Don Jr., and they are entitled to 75% of its revenue. And now it's being leveraged to facilitate pardons for criminals. Justin's son, a crypto billionaire, was under SEC investigation for securities fraud after investing $75 million in World Liberty Financial. Guess what, Kara? The SEC dismissed his case. This is what fucking infuriates me. I'm a realpolitik guy. I don't mind a little bit of corruption as long as it's good for all Americans. I don't mind a little bit of strong arming. But here's the problem, or the tragedy. If Trump brought half the competence, expertise, and elegance to governance as he does to grifting, the country would be in a much better place. We have a mob family running the country. That's the bad news. The worst thing is that Michael Corleone is managing the crime, and Fredo is managing the government. You are so good at stealing. Can you bring some of that elegance, that expertise to the government?
The American empire is over. We're done. We peaked about 12, 15 years ago, and we are on a down. We are now at a level of debt this country has never seen. It's becoming a scary problem because if the rest of the world no longer lends to the United States government to cover its deficits, what are we going to do? Let's remember that for many, many people, you get paid less if you work for the government than if you go in the private sector. And the compensation for that was job security. What Mr. Trump and Mr. Musk are doing, more than what the workers are that they fire, is they've taken that security away. Where do you think public employees are going to go if either they've lost their job, which is happening to tens of thousands, or they're scared silly that they might lose their job? They're going to go into the private sector. Where else are they going to go? Which means they're going to drive down wages and working conditions in the private sector, because the worker who comes from the private sector, laid off after 5-10 years, that means not only your job is gone, your income is gone, but your career ladder has just been yanked out from under you. So you're desperate, you're worried. You will offer yourself one way or another for less money than the person who's in that private sector job now. It used to be called trickle-down economics. You help the folks at the top, you boost the profits, you give them a tax cut, and it'll trickle down to a good job for me and all that. I'm going to be more nice now than I ought to be. There was a grain of truth to that, but it isn't anymore. And that's perhaps the most important thing that I can tell you. And I'll say it as bluntly as I know how. The American empire is over. We're done. We peaked about 12, 15 years ago, and we are on a down. And it's very hard for the American people, which I understand. I am one. It's hard to get your head around that. We've had a century of on the way up, which is a lot more fun than on the way down. But it does happen to every empire. We're only the latest. Look at the British, how far they've fallen. We're in that process. So the problem with the trickle down is, yeah, there might be more jobs, but they're going to be created in China. They're going to be created in Brazil. They're going to be created in India. They're not created here. This is a cut based on desperation. This is an economy that is indeed, we have the greatest level of corporate debt this country has ever seen, off the chart. The greatest level of personal debt, and we have the greatest level of government debt. Our government debt is now trillions of dollars greater than our annual output. That was not the case in the 20th century. It is the case now. What you're seeing is desperation politics. The whole Trump phenomena ought to say to you, wait a minute. These jerky moves that are out of whack. In recent days, we have seen the decision of the Trump administration to kiss the war in Ukraine goodbye. We're not doing that no more because we can't afford it. We can't keep funding a war, which, by the way, the West is losing, as anybody who pays attention knows. All of these things are signs of what? Of a country that is in trouble and is turning on its friends because it can to save itself. We're going to take over. We're going to get your energy for nothing. We're going to make you build the wall in Mexico. Look what the genius, in a way, of Mr. Trump is that without understanding it, because clearly he doesn't, he feels in his own way, the way lots of people do, that there's something that necessitates going way beyond what has been done because our need as a society is beginning to show up. Let me give you a simple example. The best electric vehicles in the world right now, by uniform global agreement, are produced by something called the BYD Corporation, which probably most folks have never heard of, which is Chinese. They make the best quality, cheapest electric car and truck. Right? You don't see them anywhere in the United States. Why not? Because Mr. Trump put a 27% tariff on them, and Mr. Biden raised it to 100%. So let me give you an example. If you wanted to buy a $30,000 BYD electric vehicle, which you could do, that's what they charge. That's why it's so good. You would have to pay $30,000 to get the Chinese to ship it here. Then you'd have to give another $30,000, 100%, tariff to Uncle Sam, or in this case, Uncle Don, in the way of a tariff. So it would cost you $60,000, which you're not going to do because you can get a less good Tesla or GM or Ford or anybody else at $40,000 to $50,000, which is less than you'd have to pay. But here's the problem. Everywhere else in the world, every company in Asia, Africa, Latin America that competes with an American company that has to buy a truck as part of its business will go to China and buy the best truck at the lowest price, $30,000, the best truck. No American company that competes with them will do that. And you know what that means? Those companies will be able to charge a lower price because they have better inputs than the American company, which doesn't. In the long run, that will lose Americans' jobs left and right as they're outcompeted by all the rest of the world that can go and buy and is buying BYD trucks. If you go to Europe right now and you go on the auto routes all over Europe, you'll see BYD cars and trucks. America is shooting itself in the foot. It may be great politics for Mr. Trump. I'm helping the auto companies and the workers. He'll go to Michigan and give us... Yeah, but what you're doing is diminishing the capability of the United States to hold on at a time when its footprint in the world is shrinking. If you take the United States together with the other G7 countries, that used to be the dominant bloc of the world, right? The United States, let's just enumerate them so everybody knows. Canada, Japan, Germany, France, Italy, and Britain, okay? The G7 world. I'm going to add up all the GDP, gross domestic product, total output of goods and services of all of those 7 countries, U.S. and its major allies. And now I'm going to compare it to the gross added up GDPs of China and its allies, known now as the BRICS. You add up the United States, about 28% of world output. You add up China and the BRICS, it's 35% of the world output. We aren't the wealthiest bloc in the world. We're number 2. And that's new. And that changes everything. Every country in Asia, Africa, Latin America, trying to figure out who to go to borrow money from, who to go to cut a deal with, who to go to sell your exports, who to go to invest in your railroads. You know where they used to go? Washington, London, Paris, of course. Now they go there. That's right. They go to Sao Paulo, New Delhi, Beijing, and they ask, can you give us a better deal? And here's the news I got to give you. They get the better deals, and they go that way. And that's not going to stop. And you can rattle your sabers all over the board. You put the 7th Fleet in the South China Sea, isn't going to change that. You've got to come to terms with that, but we are led by people who don't want to do that, because nobody wants to be the politician who has to explain to the people it's over. And we now have to figure out, which we should do and we could do, and we have still lots of resources to manage coming to terms with the changed situation. It's never worked that way. We have a global economy. We're more globalized than we ever were. We have language now. Supply chain. Almost every American kind of understands what's a supply chain. Didn't used to think about things like that because we were all here. When they say supply chain, they kind of know that when you get up in the morning and you have your breakfast, the coffee doesn't come from America and the sugar in it doesn't come from America. So if you put a lot of tariff, your latte is going to cost you $30. Uh-oh. How are you going to manage this in a country already troubled with inequality? The price increases alone, suggested by what he's doing, the dramatic actions, they look dramatic. I'm helping America. It looks wonderful. I mean, it's choreographed in Hollywood, but it doesn't work. I don't know how to say this politely. He doesn't understand the economics real well. The things he said are things which an undergraduate after maybe 3 weeks wouldn't say. I'll give you an example. Tariffs. He keeps saying, and he said it before, the tariffs, I'm going to get China with these tariffs. Tariffs are paid by Americans to the American government. Tariffs are a tax. It's a tax on imports to which we have given historically a particular name, tariff. But it's a tax. And people ought to wonder, the anti-tax party, Republicans, are the big gung-ho for a tax. Something has changed. He keeps thinking that he can hit other countries with a tariff. No, you hit us with the tariff. We have to pay it. It means we will have to pay more for everything you attach a tariff to. Why does every company tell us safety is our first concern? Why do they tell us that? Because it isn't. That's why they tell us. They have to tell us that. Because we're all smart enough to understand. We know why they're in business. They're in business to make a buck. Because we're in the business, many of us, to make a buck. We understand. And can you be tempted to do something that might not be? Sure you can. If you study colonialism, you discover that most of the time, when a country began going overseas and snatching parts of the world, it was because of 2 things. 1, it needed to, and 2, it could. The United States needs it, and the United States can. It can't take over Europe. It's too expensive, too difficult. They're too rich, and they're too powerful. And they can't control Russia. They are learning that now, badly. And they can't control China. They've learned that now for 25 years. But what can they control? They can control Mexico. They can control Canada. Or at least they can make a stab at it. $1 out of $5 worth of food that you and I and everybody eats comes from overseas, and most of that from Mexico and Canada. Energy comes. A huge portion of our energy is Canadian oil, gas, and so on. So these are basic things we need, and we're strong enough. They depend on us way more than we depend on them. We're a much bigger economy than either of them. So we can. And he's also aware, he's a good politician, he's aware that a lot of the things he's going to do are going to produce real tensions inside the United States between those parts of the community that are hurt and those that are not. Foreign adventures have always had that wonderful quality that we can unite our country in opposition to, in feeling superior to, in benefiting from really, or by imagination, those other over there. Economically, the game is over. The Chinese, if not already wealthier economic unit than we are, which they probably are, will be within a few years. Very few, like by the end of this decade, if not already. So economically, they are now our equal. But remember, they're our equal, they're going up, we're going down. We're equal, but the trajectory is unmistakable across the board. And so politically, it comes right after that. If you're that powerful economically, if you're the place that the whole world goes to cut a deal because you get a better deal than you can get from Washington or London, which is now most of the time the case. That's why if you look at the biggest harbor being built in Africa, it's being built by the Chinese. If you look at the new railroads going across parts of Latin America, it's built by the Chinese. On and on and on. The Panama Canal, why does he want to take it? The United States is the number one country using the Panama Canal. China's number two. China has built all these buildings to handle their shipping. It's everywhere, and once you start looking, you see it everywhere. But militarily, there's none of that. Americans have to understand, even if you don't agree with me, try to understand how the rest of the world looks at it. The United States maintains 750 military bases around the world. China doesn't have any. The United States is a global military presence, the likes of which is not existing anywhere. We are alone in that. I think you're at a crossroads now. Either you decide to stay with what you're doing, in which case you're right. They will, even if they, in their minds, think it's defensive, who cares? They will develop a military capability because that will be their only safety for them. Forget whether you agree with them or not. It's not the issue. But there's an alternative. The alternative is you sit down and you say to your adversary, we both got to live on this planet. Can we work out a deal where we give each other the room to function, to live? Because if we threaten each other, what's the end game of this? We spend a fortune fighting. If we ever slip and make a nuclear war, it's over anyway. So that's a dead end. Why don't we try that? It's a better shot. The United States is at that point which every empire has had when it's over, when the empire is in decline. It's happened to every other empire. I know we might want to believe that we are the exception, we are the empire that will last forever, but the burden is on the person who believes that, given the historical record. But the important thing is not the lousy leader, which we have. The importance is that on the issue of what we just talked about, coming to terms with China, sitting down, how do we live together on this planet? Unfortunately, Mr. Trump is exactly where Mr. Biden was. There is no difference between them. The pivot to China, which, by the way, was initiated in those words by Mr. Obama as president, has been followed by everybody since. In fact, one of the arguments made by the new defense head is that we have to free up our resources to confront our real problem. You're going to see that coming from the Trump administration now more and more as they disengage from Ukraine, a lost cause. Everything the United States has been thrown into that war. Remember at the beginning of the Ukraine war, we weren't going to give them Abrams tanks. We weren't going to give them F-16s. We weren't going to give them HIMARS. We weren't going to give them long-range missiles. Everything that President Biden said, was unturned. We gave them because they were losing. They needed more and more. He wants still more. He wants nuclear. There's no end he's losing his country. About a quarter of it are gone already. The Russians occupy it, and they keep moving westward. It's a losing proposition. It's as if the whole 20th century, when I was growing up, I'm a creature of the 20th century, at least the second half of it, everything was told to us in terms of the Cold War. Capitalism, democracy, over here, communism, socialism, over there. That was the great struggle. What happened? All gone? What? Now we're talking Russia, China, we're talking countries, which we used to do before the struggle became socialism and communism. So for me, I think all Mr. Trump is doing is saying, okay, we are now in a world of big powers, Russia, China, US, Europe, but the Europeans are disunified. They're not doing anything. They're not inventing anything. They're fading out of the story. It's really sad for the Europeans. But we're here, and the Chinese are the big one coming up. Let's remember, keep perspective. America's population is 4.5% of this world. China and the BRICS together is 50-60% of the world. It's not close. They would have seen that there are three ways things can go in Ukraine. Number one, we can have a nuclear fight with the Russians. I want to remind everyone, because Americans don't like to face this. Most of the world believes, and that's all I can say, therefore I believe it too, that the largest nuclear Armageddon force in the world is the Russians. Bigger than the Chinese and bigger than ours. Number two, a conventional war. That would mean hundreds of thousands of American troops would have to be shipped over there and fight against the Russians. You know, the record historically is not real good. Napoleon invaded Russia, was real sorry. Hitler invaded Russia, was real sorry. Do we really? Mr. Biden always said, no troops on the ground, no boots on the ground. He seemed, and I'm going to give him credit, that's a recipe for a disaster that we'll not be able to control. Okay, but there is no third option other than to walk away. Mr. Trump said, I agree with you, I'm walking away. Mr. Trump did it. Mr. Biden couldn't because he was so deeply in. Look, it took us, most people understand, it took us several years to withdraw from Afghanistan. But we lost in Afghanistan. I know this is hard for Americans. We went to war in Afghanistan against the Taliban. You know who runs the country now? The Taliban. We lost. We went into Vietnam to fight against the North Vietnamese. The country was divided at that time, which was run by the North Vietnamese Communist Party. You know who runs Vietnam now? The Communist Party. We lost. We went into Iraq. We were supposed to do something there, hard knows what, but we lost there. We're gone there too. And we're in the process of losing Ukraine. If you're an empire and you lose against some of the poorest countries on earth, you know what it suggests? Something's wrong. Look, when you came out of World War II in 1945, the United States was absolutely dominant. Most of the second half of the 20th century, where people, watching this program, we all have at least some memory about it. We were the richest country, the most politically powerful. We had all those bases around the world. We had the biggest military. Wow. Yes, it go to your head. It does. We were king of the hill. But those things are always temporary. They always have been. When we go to Egypt, we look at the ruins of their empire. When we go to France, we look at the chateaus that are the memory of what they once were. It's not going to happen to us. We're somehow different. It's already happened. We haven't been paying attention because it's so painful to look at. I think I'm the patriot saying to America, to save the good things about the society, let's sit down and work with... Look, China says, I'm not asking anyone to believe it. I'm not sure I believe it. But China says they're in favor of a multinational world. They're not interested in being the next empire. Maybe because they once were an empire some centuries ago, they may understand better than most. It's a short run. It's a heady run, but it's a short run. And maybe they will be willing to sit down. And then the United States has a really good deal because right after China, it's us. We still are rich and powerful as a nation. So maybe the best move is to sit down with the up-and-comers and work something out.
Holy hell, kid.
The real problem is that the federal government has too much power. They overstep their bounds. The power needs to go back to the states, where the federal government is more of a managing role, not a leadership role. Right now, they dictate the policy of the country.
That's a good way of putting it.
The states need to dictate their own policy based on their own electorate, based on the people that actually live there.
Yeah.
Let the people of Georgia decide how people of Georgia live. We give too much power to the federal government, and these people sit in their little shadowy rooms within Washington, D.C., have a complete disconnect with the people that they represent. They don't even represent them. They represent themselves.
Yeah.
And we are expected to just blindly comply to the decisions they make in the shadows. It's bullshit.
So let's talk about federalism. Federalism is the relationship between the federal government and the state. So on a law school fact pattern, if we see that a state is passing a law, the first thing we will ask ourselves is whether or not the state has the powers to actually pass this law. In thinking about this, you must know that there are exclusive powers for the federal government, there are exclusive powers for the state government, and then there are concurrent powers that both the state and the federal government have together. So let's first talk about the federal government. The federal government has powers within the U.S. Constitution that are expressed, which means that the Constitution clearly states that the federal government has the power to do these certain things. And then you have implied powers where the Constitution does not expressly state that the federal government has the power to do these things, but it is implied through the verbiage and through the writing of the Constitution. So an example of an exclusive federal power that is expressed, which means that the Constitution clearly states that this is something the federal government has power over, would be coinage and the power to enter into treaties. So states do not have the power or cannot pass laws coining their own money, or states cannot pass acts or laws or cannot enter into treaties with foreign nations. That power is expressly limited in the Constitution to the federal government. So inherent powers are powers exclusively for the federal government, but because of the nature of the power, states cannot exercise that power. So for an example, the power to declare war. The Constitution does not expressly say that the states cannot declare war, but because this is such a dominant and intrinsic power, that this power is only reserved to the federal government. So, in essence, states cannot pass a law where the Constitution expressly states that this sort of power is for the federal government, or whether it is inherently implied that the federal government has this type of power. So now let's talk about exclusive state powers. So the Constitution states in the 10th Amendment that powers that are not delegated in the Constitution are reserved for the states. So there are very few exclusive powers reserved for the state, like establishing a local government or regulating purely interstate activity. Lastly, you have concurrent powers, which are powers that both the federal and the state government can pass. For an example, the power to tax. In some states, we have to pay federal taxes and we have to pay state taxes. Well, let's put it all together about going through the steps for a law school or a bar exam fact pattern. So if a state is passing a law, the first thing you would do is to figure out whether if it is a power of the state, if it is a federal power, or if it is a concurrent power that both the state and the federal government both have. You will see if there is any conflict between the state law and the federal law. If so, we know that the federal law is the supreme law of the land, the supremacy clause. So the federal law preempts the state law. There are two different types of preemptions. You have express preemption and you have implied preemption. So express preemption is kind of like what we've been talking about with express powers, is when the Constitution says expressly that the state does not have the power to do X, Y, and Z. For an example, the Constitution says that the state does not have the power to enter into treaties with foreign nations. If a state tries to pass a law entering into a treaty with foreign nations, then we would say that this state law is expressly preempted. Sometimes we see this in treaties and in coinage. Now, the federal government can have a clause that states that the states cannot regulate in this type of area, which would be called a preemption clause. The government may also put in a savings clause where it will allow a state to regulate in that particular area. The second type of preemption is implied preemption, and this is the most commonly tested. There are three types of implied preemption. You have field, where the Congress intends for the federal government to basically take over that whole field of law where the states can't come in and have any type of say so. Then you have directly conflicts, where the federal law and the state law directly conflicts with with each other. And then you have indirectly conflicts where the state law and the federal law can both be enacted, but there is frustration between the two. And I'm going to give you an example. So let's first talk about field. So like I said earlier, field is where Congress intends for the federal government to basically take over the entire field. And we kind of see this when the more details that the Congress puts or the federal law has within that certain type of arena, the less the states can come in and regulate. An example of this would be the federal aviation law, and where there are really no room for the states to try to come in and touch on this subject, because the federal guidelines are very specific and very detailed on how they want the planes to be manufactured, how big or how wide they want the runways, different rules for the airlines. So even if the state tried to make a rule or make a law in dealing with federal aviation, it would get struck down, because this is just one of those things that the federal government regulates and controls. Directly conflicts is where it is just virtually impossible for the state law and the federal law to exist at the same time. So obviously we know the federal law will preempt the state law. Lastly, you have indirect conflict. The state law creates an obstacle or it directly frustrates the federal law. So an example of this is Perez versus Campbell, which is a case that happened in Arizona. So in Arizona, they had a law that if you were to get in a car accident and you failed to pay your debt with the car accident, then your license could be suspended. On the contrary, you have the federal bankruptcy law, where if you get into a huge amount of debt, you are able to file for bankruptcy, and essentially with extra fees, you're able to file for bankruptcy and basically start all the way over. So here Perez got into an accident and he was unable to pay his debt, so his driver's license was suspended. On the flip side, he filed for bankruptcy. So he went to court and basically was saying that the federal bankruptcy law preempts the Arizona state law, because bankruptcy allows him to start over and to have a fresh start, unlike the Arizona law, which states that if he does not pay off his fines from the car accident, then his license is suspended, which that frustrates the bankruptcy law. So the court basically sided with Perez, stating that the federal bankruptcy law preempts the Arizona state law. This will be an example of an indirect conflict under the implied preemption, which, like I said earlier, is most likely or most commonly seen on law school fact patterns and bar exams per my bar prep. To recap, you have exclusive federal powers, and under exclusive federal powers, you have express powers, which are expressed in the U.S. Constitution, and then you have inherent powers, which are not expressed in the Constitution, but you could just tell by the language of the Constitution and the nature of the power itself that is reserved, that it is reserved strictly for the federal government. Then you have exclusive state powers, which are powers strictly for the states, and then you have concurrent powers, which are powers that the federal government and the state both have, just like the power to tax. If there is any conflict between the federal law and the state law, then you will talk about the supremacy clause, which states that the federal government preempts the state law. And there are different types of preemption. First, have express preemption, where it states in the Constitution that states do not have the power to do X, Y, and Z. Important example, enter into treaties and coin money. And then you have implied preemption, where it doesn't necessarily say that the states doesn't have the power to do it in the Constitution, but it is implied by one field, and that's where the federal government has the intent to occupy the whole field. Basically, it is very detailed, and they don't want the states to come in and have any type of say. So, two, if it directly conflicts, so basically if the federal law and the state law cannot coexist, or three, if it indirectly conflicts, where the state law frustrates the federal law, like we saw in the Perez v. Campbell case. So that's really it when it comes to the different types of preemption.
She's just so fucking smart. You know, I just want to be better for her. I want to be able to challenge and inspire her, but I feel like she doesn't even need that from me.
So this is from Representative James Traficant Jr. of Ohio when he addressed the House of Representatives March 17, 1993. He begins, Mr. Speaker, we are here now in Chapter 11. Members of Congress are official trustees presiding over the greatest reorganization of any bankrupt entity in world history, the U.S. government. We are setting forth, hopefully, a blueprint for our future. There are some who say it is a coroner's report that will lead to our demise. It is an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act, March 9th, 1933. 48 Stat 1, Public Law 89-719, declared by President Roosevelt, being bankrupt and insolvent, HJR 192, 73rd Congress M Session, June 5th, 1933. Joint resolution to suspend the gold standard and abrogate the gold clause, dissolved the sovereign authority of the United States in the official capacities of all United States government offices, and departments, and is further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only. The Federal Reserve Act stipulated that the interest on the debt was to be paid in gold. There was no stipulation in the Federal Reserve Act for ever paying the principal. Prior to 1913, most Americans owned clear, allodial title to property, free and clear of any liens or mortgages until the Federal Reserve Act 1913. In 1933, the federal United States hypothecated all of the present and future properties, assets, and labor of their subjects. The 14th Amendment, U.S. citizen to the Federal Reserve System. In return, the Federal Reserve System agreed to extend the Federal United States Corporation all the credit it needed. Since the Federal United States didn't have any assets, they assigned the private property of their economic slaves, the United States citizens, as a collateral against the unpayable federal debt. They also pledged the unincorporated federal territories, national parks, forests, birth certificates, and nonprofit organizations as collateral against the federal debt. All has already been transferred as payment to the international bankers. Few of our elected representatives in Washington, D.C. have dared to tell the truth. It reminds me of some of the words of John F. Kennedy that he said just secretly about secret societies and secret oaths, secret proceedings, but he said something. He said, no rumor is printed. No information is circulated about this. No rumor is printed. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. So also in his speech, he talked about covert means, that is secret means, that its hidden power structure is invisible to most people because they largely believe the lies they are told. And if you believe that that is somehow true, ask yourself, why was this man, after giving such a speech in Congress, removed? If it is not true, why such a big deal to go and sweep him away and silence his voice, to be able to prevent people and the citizens of the United States to understand just what is going on in our nation? But you know, it does not have to be this way. It does not have to be this way. This is an undeclared economic war, bankruptcy, and economic slavery of the most corrupt order. Wake up, America. Take back our country. So it's interesting that the man in 2002 was arrested and put in jail as a part of some sort of corruption scandal. And it's no surprise that he spent 7 years there, only to die while in jail. He represented Youngstown, Ohio from 1985 to 2002. He was reelected by the people, the voters who put him into office, and it was only being framed for corruption in 2002 that he would be expelled from Congress and spend the last 7 years of his life in prison. These are little known facts that most people are entirely in the dark about, they're completely unaware of, and it's something that cannot be brought out into the light. some of the most powerful words, and I'll read it just one last time, quote, "We are reaping what we have sown. The results of our harvest is a painful bankruptcy and a foreclosure on American property, precious liberties, and a way of life. Few of our elected representatives in Washington, D.C. have dared to tell the truth. The federal United States is bankrupt. Our children will inherit this unpayable debt and the tyranny to enforce paying it."
Because the government already raises our kids, defends our families, educates our kids, feeds our kids, houses our kids. The government is doing a very poor job of it.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 5 minutes without objection.
We are here now in Chapter 11. Members of Congress are official trustees presiding over the greatest reorganization of any bankrupt entity in world history, the U.S. government. We are setting forth, hopefully, a blueprint for our future. There are some that say it's a coroner's report that will lead to our demise. The major assumption was very simple. We're going to cut taxes, put money in the pocket of the American people, and when they spend this money, our gross national product is going to rise so great that even though we've reduced your tax liability on a percentile basis, we'll balance the budget, quoting Ronald Reagan in the fall of '82. But let me give one word of caution here today. America already has race wars, let's be honest about it. We already have gender wars, let's be honest about it. We already have age wars, let's be honest about it. One thing this Congress better not get involved in and get trapped into is a class war on money. In America, if you cannot earn all that you can, there's something wrong and there's no more a spirit of free enterprise. And I want to say this to the members. We may talk about taxing the rich, but the rich people have already taken their companies and their jobs out of America. Be careful that the rich people don't take their money out of America, because the government already raises our kids, defends our families, educates our kids, feeds our kids, houses our kids, and the government is doing a very poor job of it. I think mom and dad would be better utilized there once again. So I'm going to listen to the debate, and I don't know if I'll vote for this budget. And finally, I don't know if the budget makes one damn bit of difference, because we wave it all the time, and I don't think we've ever followed it. I think we've got an excellent chairman that worked hard, and if we're going to have a budget, we should follow it. If not, we once again as members waste both our time and the people's time. But let me say this just in closing. Today's not the mother of all debates and the mother of all decisions. When that tax package comes, you will have the mother of all votes on the floor. And let me say this. I'm not for voting any more taxes on the back of the American people, because I believe the tax of 1990 put us right here today. And I am very concerned about the tax packages being discussed in this Congress. I'm one Democrat that believes we should stimulate the private sector. We already have more government jobs than factory jobs, and I think that's an indictment on our Congress. Basic tenet of this Constitution, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and there can be no life, liberty, or pursuit of happiness in America without a job. And I'd like to see the mother of all debates center around the jobs bill. Yield back to Bounceman.
Between 1930 and 1933, the United States experienced a severe banking crisis that shook the foundation of its economy. The Great Depression had already caused widespread financial distress, and as people lost their jobs and savings, they began withdrawing money from banks in a panic. This led to a wave of bank failures, as banks couldn't cover the sudden demand for cash. Over 9,000 banks failed during this period, wiping out the life savings of millions of Americans. The lack of confidence in the banking system made the economic situation even worse, as people were scared to deposit money or invest. This vicious cycle of fear and bank failures deepened the Great Depression. In response, President Franklin D. Roosevelt declared a bank holiday in 1933, temporarily closing all banks to prevent further runs. This led to the creation of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, which restored trust by insuring deposits and stabilizing the banking system.
That day is over. America is facing the judgment of God as we sit around this table. Look at the weather. Look at the world turning down on her. America is bankrupt. $13 trillion in debt. And if you figure Medicare and Medicaid, she's over $60 trillion in debt. She can never pay it. That's why she voted for $650 billion in armament, because she can't pay the debt. But she can bully those whom she is in debt to with fear over her military prowess. I'm here to tell you she's losing there too.
Who knows, maybe we'll pay off our $35 trillion, hand him a little crypto check, right? We'll hand him a little Bitcoin and wipe out our $35 trillion. But how do you...
I've lied to a face. I've lied to disgrace. I've lied about sex, religion, and race. I've lied to elope, got married for hope. I'll continue to lie. I've lied in this poem.
Let's talk about Bitcoin in El Salvador, or should I say the Bitcoin experiment that came, saw, and well, mostly confused everyone before quietly stepping aside. So, back in 2021, El Salvador made history as the first country in the world to make Bitcoin legal tender. The idea? Financial freedom, innovation, and let's be real, a little bit of that were different flex on the global stage. But 3 years later, the dream has, let's just say, timed out due to a network error. By 2024, 92% of Salvadorians weren't using Bitcoin for transactions. That's almost everyone. Imagine if 92% of people ignored the existence of credit cards. Yeah, that's not great for an economy. And then there was Chivo Wallet, the government's app meant to make Bitcoin transactions smooth and easy. So what finally made El Salvador say, all right, we're done? The International Monetary Fund, or IMF. They were like, cool experiment, but if you want that $1.4 billion loan, Bitcoin's gotta go. And El Salvador's Congress said, say less. So now it's back to the US dollar as the country's official currency, and Bitcoin is just, well, there. Like that one gym membership that you just keep but never use. Alright, let me know what you think. Was this a failed experiment or just ahead of its time?
I'm tired of this, Grandpa.
That's too damn bad! You keep digging!
Well, excuse me.
You'll thank me one day.
And you find that a large portion of the economies of red states depend on federal dollars. Now, here's the irony. Residents of blue states send more tax money to Washington than they get back in federal help, while residents of red states send less money to Washington than they get back in federal help. In 2015, for example, New Jersey got back only 74 cents in federal spending for every tax dollar it sent to Washington. New York got back 81 cents for every dollar. Connecticut, 82 cents for every dollar. Massachusetts, 83 cents. But when you turn to the red states, it's the opposite. Mississippi received $2.13 for every tax dollar it sent to Washington. West Virginia, $2.07 per dollar. Kentucky, $1.90 for every dollar it sent to Washington. And South Carolina, $1.71. Taking the Trump administration's expansive view of the meaning of welfare to its logical conclusion, to include all those benefiting from federal spending, blue states are sending welfare to red states. The same red states that say they don't like welfare.
Oh, y'all, happy Thursday. I'm back here to put y'all up on some more game. So a popular slogan right now within the Republican Party is, "We're so back." And, you know, like I said, there's a lot more second and third generation Americans here. So a lot of people don't know why that slogan means what it means. So for a long time, y'all, a long time in America, these men were soaring so high. Listen, you couldn't touch them. A lot of y'all like, man, why would they crash the economy just to have him back in there? Because I'm telling you, it runs so deep, that feeling of being on top, that they're willing to take it. And you're not from here. Many of y'all are not from here. You're not, your family haven't been here long enough. You don't understand how deep that runs in that blood to feel on top of everybody, to feel superior. People are willing to crash societies and communities and countries just to get that feeling back. In other communities, like the black community, they were bystanders to this. They watched that soaring high. Oh yes, they watched them soar high. In many of these spaces, it was very exclusionary. Only certain people could get in. The membership was so exclusionary. You could not get in there if you was not one of them. They're chasing that feeling again, y'all. And like I said, even the men in their 50s and 60s, right, they had that. See, their sons won't get it because, the Democrats and policies, right, have kind of set these systems back in place to where, right, you get equal opportunity. But before, y'all, I mean straight, I'm not even talking about you can buy your way in. No. You're born into it. You go straight to the top. As soon as you pop out your mama, you're straight up. It used to be like a funny little slogan that people used to say, oh, well, they come out and they already got an 800 credit score. That wasn't just, that's true. And so people, to get that feeling back, that, oh, we're so back. See, it's not as easy now, right? But that's why they're saying we're so back, y'all, because they're like, yes, we can finally be back on top. They're chasing that feeling that their dad had. They never had this. People in their 30s and 40s, y'all, they reached the end of that. But them men in their 50s and 60s, oh, they know what it feel like to be on top. They know what it feel like to be the most important man in America. Y'all, I hope that cleared up some confusion for some of y'all. Obviously, there's a lot of things that you got to explain it this way because it's very hard to break that down in this short amount of time span. So I'm back here with part 2 for my last video. Why are the Republicans so excited about crashing the economy? Because, y'all, they were the gods of the South, like literal gods for much of America's history. Whether you ate, where you lived, what land you lived on, your housing, your education, who got money, where the food went to, where all the resources went to, who got the jobs. That's why you can even see, you're like, why is the poor Republicans so thirsty for this? Because even that little bit of power they had at their fingertips. For much of America's history, they even controlled whether people lived or died. They were the gods of the South, y'all. Y'all are not hearing me. And so as that power begins to trickle away, they're grasping for straws trying to get it back. Because they feel like it's so in their bloodline, it's so within them that they need to have it. They're thirsting for it. And they're willing to let this burn if they can't get it. They're willing to crash everything if they can't get it. They're hoping that Trump can redo it and he can reel it back in and they can get their power back. They were the hero and the villain, the conqueror and the savior. They were the god of the South, y'all. So watching this all go down and them fighting for that, it's not a surprise to me. Hell, it's not a surprise for anybody who family have been here, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 generations. It's only going to be a surprise for Democrats and people whose family have been in here, they're second and third generation Americans.
The whole history of America is the history of rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. It starts in the colonies of what would become the United States. Let's remember, during the colonial period, mid-1600s, there was no such thing as white people. I know some people who are now called white find that shocking, right? Because they think whiteness is real, right? But whiteness was created. Europeans didn't call themselves white. We didn't call ourselves white. We weren't all members of one big happy family. Are you kidding? Have you studied the history of Europe? The history of Europe was about killing each other. That's what we did in Europe. We just killed each other before we figured out there were other people to kill. We just killed each other, right? I mean, that was the history of Europe. The English hated the Irish, right? Northern Italians didn't even think that Southern Italians were Italians. The Germans hated everybody, and everybody hated their ass right back, right? There was no team called white, no race called white, but all of a sudden, in the middle of the 1600s, there was. Why? Why was it suddenly necessary to create this thing called the white race? Well, because rich people can count, that's why. And so rich folks looked around, the ones that owned all the land, in the colonies, the colonial elite looked around and they realized something, that they were heavily outnumbered by African enslaved folks, by European indentured servants who were just one level above a slave, or other Europeans who weren't technically indentured servants, but they were still peasants, didn't have any money, didn't have any land, and they could do the math. They added it up and they were like, damn, we got to figure out a way to split these folks apart from one another or they're going to rise up and take our stuff, right? Because after a while, these black folks who were enslaved Africans and these quote unquote white folks who were poor Europeans are going to figure out they're all getting played by these rich people, right? So ultimately the rich figure out they got to come up with some way to get somebody in that group on their team. The easiest thing is to get the poor Europeans, right? Because at least they look like you. They sort of share some of the customs and the culture. So they all of a sudden create this thing called whiteness and they say, now you're part of the club. Now we're going to let you testify in court, enter into contracts, vote, at least if you're a man, own a little bit of land, at least if you're a man, right? And we're going to get rid of indentured servitude. No more of that, because you're too good for that. And we're going to take the white men, now called white men, and put them on the slave patrol to keep black people in line. Give them a horse and a gun and a badge and make them feel big and powerful, right? They're still poor. They still don't have anything. They didn't pay the slave patrol well, right? Just exploited them, used them as a buffer between the elite and the other poor folks, particularly poor folks of color. And pretty soon the rebellions that occasionally happened where black and white got together to overthrow the elite, those stopped because the divide and conquer had begun to work, right? You could turn people against each other by telling those poor white folks, they got to keep these black people in line. And so that divide and conquer gets initiated in the colonies. Rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. Fast forward to the Civil War era. And you have, I'm from the South, right? My people, the elite in my part of the country, right, actually announced that the reason they wanted to break away from the Union and possibly go to war with their brothers and sisters to the North was in order to maintain slavery and white supremacy. They said that at the time. We lie about it now. And we say it had nothing to do with that. But of course, at the time, they didn't have any shame about it, so they just said it openly. Right? The vice president of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens, said that the cornerstone of the new government was the great truth that the Negro was not the equal of the white man. So that's the reason the Confederacy was formed and existed. But here's the trick. If I'm rich and I want to go to war to protect my ownership in other human beings, my property, but you're poor and you don't own any enslaved people, why the hell would you go fight to protect my stuff? Because I'm a rich person. I'm not going to fight. Rich people don't go to war, right? Rich people get poor people to go to war for them, whether it's in 1860 or whether it's during the 1960s or whether it's today, right? Rich folks get doctors to write notes for them that say that they have heel spurs and that's why they can't go to Vietnam. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, you can Google that shit because he's sitting in the White House right now, right? Oh, I can't go fight. I have heel spurs. Send some poor kids to do that for me, please, right? So that's been a long-standing tradition. So the rich have to figure out a way to convince the poor to go fight for them. But that's a hard thing. That's like a hard sell, right? Like, how the hell, why would you do that? Why would you go fight to protect my property rights when you don't own anything? The only way you would do it is if that rich person comes to you and says, hey, listen, you gotta you got to go fight, because we got to maintain our way of life, because if these people get free, they're going to take your jobs. No, fool, they already got your job. That's how it works, right? Because if I'm white and I got to charge you $1 a day to work on the farm, but you can get a black person to do it for nothing because you own them, guess who got the job? Free got the job, right? So in a sense, poor white folks would have been better off joining with black folks to overthrow the slave system. That would have raised the wage floor of all working people. But they got tricked by rich white men telling them that their enemies were black and brown. Fast forward to the 1930s. And you have white labor leaders. They're not even the elite, right? The labor leaders are not the elite, but they're the elite within the labor movement. And even they had fallen for it at this point. So they didn't want to integrate their unions. And they would say things like, well, we can't have black people and Mexicans and Chinese folks in our unions, because if we do that, it's going to reduce the professionalism of our craft. We have to maintain the integrity of our profession. No, fool, you need more people in the damn union is what you need. And if you don't let those folks in, guess what happens when you go out on strike? Who is the boss going to use to replace you? They're going to replace you with the very same black and brown folks that you didn't want to work next to, right? And so at the end of and then you're going to blame them for taking your job rather than the white rich dude for giving it to them, right? Divide and conquer, telling not rich white folks that their enemies are black and brown. And now we fast forward to the president. We got the president of the United States becoming president on the basis of that same rhetoric, telling not rich white folks that the reason they don't have a job is because Mexicans took them.
I do believe there will be a rational immigration policy eventually passed. I think there's going to have to be some time. What's interesting about our country, if you study history, is that there are some isms that occasionally pop up. One is isolationism, and its evil twin protectionism, and its evil triplet nativism. So if you study the 20s, for example, there was an American first policy that said, who cares what happens in Europe? Well, what happened in Europe mattered eventually because of World War II. There was Smoot-Hawley, which was a part of an economic policy, which basically said we don't want trade. In other words, let's throw up barriers. And there was an immigration policy that I think during this period argued we had too many Jews and too many Italians, therefore we should have no immigrants. And my point to you is we've been through this kind of period of isolationism, protectionism, nativism. I'm a little concerned that we may be going through the same period. I hope that these isms pass, which would then allow for a more orderly look at immigration policy.
Okay, why are so many people Trump voters, and why do they feel so displaced and disenfranchised by minorities? It's because they are being displaced and disenfranchised. It's just not by minorities, it's by America, right? And this is the reason we know who J.D. Vance is because he wrote a memoir to try to show this. And it happened to come out just after the first Trump election, but sort of showing like the disenfranchisement and the displacement of small town America. And here's the reality. Small town America is dying. The world is changing. There are less than 1,000 farming families in the country, right? And in the summer of 2020, my little family got stuck in an RV driving around the country because we were supposed to be traveling the world, and then COVID. Okay. And I've written about this in Un-American, which is my video book that you can access on my Patreon, a whole book that I wrote about whiteness and power and privilege and myself and my crazy stories. And we ended up driving backwards across the Lewis and Clark Trail from Seattle to Washington, D.C. Okay. And in that drive, you could see it, where you could see, first of all, we saw no black people from the time we left Seattle till the time we hit Chicago, right? Very, very white. And the towns are dying. The jobs are going away. The Army recruiting stations are some of the only ways to get out of there. And this is what happens when huge shifts in the world happen. In Culting of America, I'm arguing that one of the reasons we've switched back from trusting bureaucracy and experts to charismatic leaders is because we lived through an apocalypse, which was the industrial age running smack into the information age and leaving nothing untouched. And so right now, all of these disenfranchised white people, especially the men, are very scared and very angry. And so when an idiot comes in, and tells them that immigrants are the reason and trans people are the reason and gives them someone to hate, they fall for it. But they fall for it because somebody did screw them over, right? The country, the leadership of the country, and changing times. And there's this little piece about white men and why they are so angry. And it's because they were born 50 years too late. And this is exactly my ex-husband, who I had to testify against to be kicked out of the military as a white supremacist a decade after I left him, and is the reason why I wrote Un-American. And it's the same as J.D. Vance, as all these people. If they were born 50 years ago, it would have been good enough. It was good enough to just be a mediocre white man. And they're trying to do that again, right? And it's so funny because I always hear people saying, like, if more of the pie for other people doesn't mean less of the pie for you. Yes, it does. I don't think you understand how pie works, right? It's not enough to be a mediocre white man when you have to compete with everyone else and everyone else who's had to be better than you the whole time. And so they are PO'd. Just like we look back in the day 50 years ago and say, man, our grandmothers were screwed 50, 75 years ago. They look back and they say, fudge, why can't I have what my grandfather had, which is just only working 8 hours a day and having a personal slave at home in my kitchen, raising my children, and everything in the world just bowing for me, right? So very complicated. Some of it is legitimate. Again, their way of life is dying. And when the world shifts, the people in the margins usually die, right? So they're pissed. They're scared. They're watching the American dream evaporate just like everybody else. And by the way, I want to be very clear that I am in no way defending them or the decision to vote for Trump. They are being abused and manipulated by a narcissistic cult leader who's giving them a place to focus their fear and something they can do about it. And this is what cults do. They come in, they weaponize your discontent that already exists. This is why some sort of gratitude practice can be really good to keep you out of cults. Right? They weaponize your discontent that already exists, and then they promise you that their way, their method, make America great again, is going to fix everything. The promise of the cult is always a lie. Right? So no validity, no justification to these people for believing it. They have fallen for a cult. They are being conned. It's not true. And it's not okay to all of the minorities and everybody else. I'm just saying this is why it's happening. This is what we are seeing. And the other thing is, like, him wrecking the country is going to affect them too. So what you voted for. The promise of the cult is always a lie. It's always just about power and labor. I'm Danielle, a scholar of cults, extreme groups, and extremely bad leadership. I wrote a book called Uncultured, which you can't get on here right now because it is sold out. But it's on Spotify side of the subscription side of Spotify, so you can listen to it for free. I recorded it myself, and it was recommended twice in the New York Times. My book, by the way, is the blue corollary to J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy. I'm the blue J.D. Vance. I realized after the election, which is to say, the veteran that has a memoir out explaining to the world what happened. His was, this is why angry white men voted for Trump, and mine is, your family's in a cult. Check out Uncultured.
You're learning so many important things, and I'm so proud of you.
And now, back to our regularly scheduled program.
I did not realize how critical the federal government has been with building the black middle class until this commenter pointed it out a few videos ago. So thank you, Queen of Palmettos. I made a video about the class implications of this, and I want to extend the conversation to race. I'm Dr. Anna Kalschmidt. I'm an industrial organizational psychologist, and I research the unwritten rules of work for people from working class backgrounds, as well as intersections with race, gender, and neurodivergence. I've worked in public, private, and academic sectors, including 4 federal agencies. And after this commenter pointed this out, I did look into, are there more people of color in the government? And has been found that the government does hire more Black people than the private sector typically has. Of course, there are industry exceptions. You can always find an exception. Just like there are winged birds that don't fly, there's always an exception. However, something I will say is that the number one employer of people in my field typically has been the federal government, especially the military. And the reason being that there are implications for making mistakes with hiring that the government typically takes more seriously than corporate. Corporate thinks very short term. So for example, a lot of the studies on should women be in combat and what were the criteria for that were done by IO psychologists. These studies looked at how much weight somebody needed to carry to be able to lift up the average sized man in his uniform with his weapons, and could they carry them appropriately? Because dragging somebody across the field, that's a landmine risk. You got to be able to pick them up properly and carry them out. And exercises like that were how they determined if you can do this regardless of your gender, then you can qualify for being in whatever part of the military. I believe that was for being on the front lines. So these are the types of things that IO psychologists do. And when I was entering my first federal agency, I remember they presented me, I was surprised to see a competency model, which looked at what are the knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics that are needed to do the job. What does the agency value? And here are the performance criteria we've made from it. And this is what good performance is, this is what bad performance is, this is what great performance is. And it's very hard to get great performance. And I was impressed because in my experience with corporate and academic, I had never seen anything like that. Y'all want to know some tea? Academics are some of the most hypocritical about this stuff, talking about reducing bias and does the research on what is good for hiring and doesn't practice it at all within the academy, even IO psychology programs. There's not a universal hiring across the Fed. It depends by agency, but it is typically better, in my experience, in seeing that than corporate, which a lot of it is go with your gut, similar to academia. And because there's so much work on bias reduction, I could see that absolutely being why more Black people have thrived in the federal government. And to be clear, the only people who are given bonus points when they apply, even with affirmative action, the only people given bonus points when they apply to a federal job are veterans and disabled people. You do get extra points on your application if you have a documented, medically documented disability, or if you are a veteran, especially a disabled veteran. There are no extra points for being a person of color, a woman, anything else. The purpose of all of these systems is not to let unqualified, underrepresented groups in. The purpose is to not let underqualified people who are part of the majority in because of the bias. Regardless of what happens with the federal government and the employees there, I think this is a good example of why hiring using evidence-based techniques matters, and how it does make for hiring people more based on merit than identity. And if you don't think that's true, if you don't think it's possible that Black people are more qualified to do things than is typically represented in corporate, then you need to ask yourself why you assume they are not qualified.
News coming in right now, Trump's administration is giving federal agencies until mid-April to propose relocations outside of D.C. In a directive sent out today by the Director of Personnel and Management, they said any proposal relocations of agency bureaus and offices from the Washington, D.C. area and the nation's capital to a less costly part of the nation are supposed to be reported by April 14th. This could have a detrimental effect to the nation's capital's economy, just because even though about 4/5 of the federal employees and agents live outside of the DC area, the DC economy is made up about 40% of federal workers. So relocating their offices and taking them out of the area will have detrimental effects to that economy. I'll keep posting updates throughout the day. My socials are going to be here. Follow for more updates.
This was always the plan. This was always the plan. Before I say anything else, everything I express in this video are my opinions and my views, and for entertainment purposes only. This was always the plan. To overwhelm systems that function for the purpose of providing for the citizenry of this country. That was always the purpose. To make the federal sector inept, inadequate, so as to trickle down into state services, into local services, overwhelm them because of the ineptitude and the incapacity of the federal level, and then to slowly point out by those at the federal level that, hey, these states aren't able to handle what they're doing. Maybe we need to look into cutting them too, right? At least 100,000 employees have been terminated across various federal agencies and departments over the last 7 weeks. 100,000 at least. who no longer have income, a reliable source to provide for their children, maybe to provide for their significant other who maybe can't work. How many people does this affect besides the at least 100,000 employees? And tens of thousands of probationary employees have also been let go, and more reductions are expected in the near future. They are saying they had no time to prepare for unemployment because of how fast this happened, and that there's minimal communication with the administration about obtaining benefits. Does this surprise any of you whatsoever? And as a result of this, states are being inundated with social service requests for unemployment with little to no warning and dwindling financial resources. 19 state attorney generals said in a court filing last week. 19. So when I talked about at the beginning that, again, in my opinion, which is very observable if you just look around and pay attention, this was always the plan. When Donald Trump says states' rights, he said that in order to get what it was he wanted. He doesn't really care about states' rights. If he did, if he cared about the states that he oversees as the highest official in this land, if he cared about the union of the people in this land, he wouldn't be inundating through his decisions state and local resources and institutions so that they start to fail in what it is that they normally are capable of doing. He doesn't care about state or local offices. He doesn't even care about his own office. A man who litigated against his own oath of office. You think he really cares about the suffering and the spiraling of these state and local institutions as they struggle to carry the burden of decisions that he's made to the federal level? And listen to what Maryland Attorney General Anthony Brown wrote. In addition to the informational and procedural injuries resulting from the deprivation of notice to which they were entitled, that notice, the lack of notice has impeded the ability of many plaintiff states to support the affected employees and thereby mitigate the financial and other impacts on state services because they were let go in a way that doesn't abide by law and order, by rule. Donald Trump doesn't care about any of that. It is plain to see. States' rights, remember? Except when it comes to state and local climate laws in the state of Oregon. Except when it comes to emergencies declared to cut down national forests in the state of Oregon. And in directing the Forest Service to suspend normal environmental reviews, increase logging more than 100 million acres, including the Pacific Northwest, where I reside, and in the millions of acres of national forest that affect numerous states in this country. There are all the targeted areas in blue, which coincide with national forest boundaries. I've shown this before, but this just illustrates how states' rights really matter when it comes to the suppression of women's reproductive rights and their bodily autonomy. But when it comes to the rights and the privileges of those who reside within the states that will be most affected by this, not only for their recreational activities, but for their mental health and spiritual development, when they venture into these lands to connect with nature and find source, elevate their frequency, become their better selves. To hell with all that. To hell with states' rights. We'll just say it's a national emergency. But when it comes to women, let the states have them, because they don't matter enough for that to be a national issue. Only the forests, only the places that people go to find spirit and to find God and to find the better versions of themselves and to reconnect. What about states' rights here, huh? Because there hasn't been enough executive orders. Now we have to have one that takes aim at climate change laws and policies adopted by what? States and local jurisdictions that could put an array of organ programs at risk. States' rights, except when it comes to taking all appropriate action to stop the enforcement of state and local laws, regulations, causes of action, policies, and practices that address climate change. One of Donald Trump's least favorite topics. And in the words of someone most likely other than Donald Trump, these state laws and policies are fundamentally irreconcilable. Oh yeah, definitely not his words. With my administration's objective to unleash American energy, they should not stand. States' rights, right? And to make sure that he makes good on his promises to other made men in America, the order also specifically calls out climate superfund laws and climate lawsuits that seek to make fossil fuel companies pay for costs associated with responding to climate-related extreme weather events. The order also includes a call to halt attempts to collect carbon penalties or carbon taxes. And Oregon's signature climate protection program will likely be a target. Because why? Because the state's program requires ever-increasing reductions in greenhouse gas emissions from the state's natural gas utilities, suppliers of gasoline, diesel, kerosene, and propane, and large industrial plants. That's right, the state's program. Other programs the federal government may challenge include Oregon's 100% clean energy law, which requires investor-owned utilities in the state to transition to all clean electricity by 2040, the coal to clean law that phases out coal from the state's electricity supply by 2030, and the clean fuels program to reduce the carbon intensity of transportation fuels. So when it comes to all these initiatives that Oregon has tried to put into place to make things potentially better for those who reside in the state of Oregon, nah. To hell with states' rights. That's for the women. I'm going to end with this, and this might be the most important part of this post. The reason that Donald Trump seemingly has such an easy time implementing something like this as a national emergency, knowing that it's going to affect 60% or more of national forest lands, is because Donald Trump is not an adventurer. Donald Trump is not someone that recreates in these areas. He doesn't do 8-mile hikes into the local wilderness areas to camp without amenities. He doesn't do 12-mile loop hikes in a day. Donald Trump doesn't go to lakes that can only be reached by walking, by hiking, to have a day trip and fish, or just simply enjoy the scenery. He doesn't venture into these places to take pictures of wildflowers, to see the birds and the small animals that inhabit these national forest lands. He doesn't go into these areas to scout, right? He doesn't go into these areas to forage or to pick mushrooms or to send buttes or mountaintops at 10 a.m. in the morning and then have lunch atop a mountain that's isolated where you're all by yourself and you swear to God if you just reached up in the air you could touch the hand of God. Donald Trump doesn't do any of that shit. And that's why, in my opinion, he's doing this right now. It's not of any significance to him. He wants to take advantage of declaring that states just don't have the competence to take care of their own forest lands. But he does. He does, remember? You gotta rake the forests. Rake them. He knows more. He knows more than those who work in these national forest lands. That's why he's letting a lot of them go, because he knows everything. He knows everything. He's the only human being we have ever known, that I can ever recall in my life, that knows almost absolutely everything about everything and nothing about nothing. This is of no significance to him. He's not going to be around in 20 years to suffocate on the lack of oxygen from the environmental disasters and our incompetence as a collective human race to make a better place for our children and our future. He doesn't care. He won't be here. And if you think that he really cares about what's left for his children, let me remind you of what he said about 3 of his children that I know of. In an interview with Ivana Trump, she said that when she was pregnant with Donald Trump Jr., she had a conversation with Donald Trump. And he didn't know if he wanted to name his son after him because he told her, what if he grows up to be a loser? He said that about his unborn son. Who says that about their unborn child? In another interview with Marla Maples, when his daughter Tiffany, I think, was 2 years old, he was asked about his daughter Tiffany. And he said, well, we know that she has the legs like Marla, but we'll have to wait and see if she has these. And you know what he said about Ivanka Trump. You all know.
All right, day one of me not having a job, and it's time for me to tell the story of who the fake that I work for. No, I don't have a story. I wanted a story, but I don't have one. I work for a nonprofit. People have been asking, and our federal funding got cut because of the new administration. And that's okay. It's not okay. But I'm going to be okay. I am down here at the unemployment office filing for my unemployment because your girl still need her coin. And I am still processing all of this. It really hit me this morning when I did not have to get up to go to work. But in the meantime, in between time, I will be job hunting. I will be taking a break. I will be self-reflecting. I will be updating my resume. I don't know. I just will. That's it. I'm here. Follow me.
Well, if there was a doubt on Friday, it's sure as shit now. Just dropped off my computer and my ID card and my access keys, and now it's, we'll figure out a time for me to get my personal effects out of my office. Fuck. I did get to do a little bit of the last, tying up loose ends email-wise and stuff, and this region lost 11 archaeologists, 11 heritage staff. And that's just heritage. No talks on any of the other departments, but just 11. I was in charge of some 14 million acres, just me. Imagine how many 11 people covered. Fuck. I hope everyone that voted for him is happy on how he's raping the country. Because remember, it's going to be your fucking tax dollars getting spent on fighting every single one of the cases that's coming his way.
It's been a month since I lost my job because of Trump. One day I woke up and my entire career field is gone. And nobody gave a fuck.
Ignore that it's dark. I sat here in existential dread for too long. When discussing the class war in explicit terms on a live, I got a comment that said, is war really the best metaphor? I'm having mint my nerves. That lady is a casualty of the class war that is going on right now. The reason I'm stitching this video that you should most definitely watch, even though I haven't stitched a video in God knows how many years, because that person, that grieving person, is talking about the class war as someone who is a casualty of the class war. One of the reasons that nobody really gives a shit about the massive layoffs and the obvious tactics of warfare that the Trump administration is waging upon the working class American people is because we don't really see ourselves as a part of the globalized working class. In fact, we often struggle to see ourselves as working class at all. We see ourselves in our aspirations. It previously has been been temporarily embarrassed millionaire, but now if you ask someone what they want to be, they will tell you that they want to be comfortable. Same answer in different fonts. So because we keep looking up at our aspirations instead of to the left of us and to the right of us, and seeing the people who are down and out, freezing to death, homeless, etc., as people who are literally just like us, seeing people in forced migration having to move countries because of sanctions just like us, instead of seeing ourselves as the target for class war, we see ourselves as people enduring a difficult temporary circumstance. That when the people to the left of you and the people to the right of you become casualties of the class war, we don't know what to do, so we keep doing nothing. And this tells our current iterations of power that they can go a lot farther than what they're doing to us right now. That's really the most terrifying thing about coming back to the United States after not being here for a couple months. Not the news, but the level at which the news changes nothing.
Any sort of federal affiliation with DEI is likely to be severed.
This post is really hard to make. That's exactly what happened. The first thing that Donald Trump did was sever DEI in the federal government and stop all DEI programming immediately. There's going to be a lot of people that are out of work now because of their work in the DEI departments across the federal government. But on top of that, the woman that he put in place of the EEOC, Andrea Lucas, her number one objective is to get rid of anything that is DEI focused in corporations. That was something that I didn't anticipate. I knew that there was going to be a pushback, there was going to be a rollback, but she's really looking to sever anything DEI related in companies. What does this mean? So this means that this isn't just the federal government. This is anybody that has a DEI program put in place. It is now in jeopardy. If you are filing a case of discrimination with the EEOC, it is going to be harder for your claim to get approved. It's already pretty challenging. It just is. It's the nature of the beast. But you need to have your stuff ironclad on video if you can, as much proof as possible. And that's always good to do when you need to file a complaint against discrimination, but it will be more challenging. Sorry, I'm realizing as I'm talking, I have no idea what my personal future is. Whew. I really hate this. If you're somebody who is coming out, I would never tell somebody to stay in the closet, but I want y'all to stay safe, okay? So that means what you need to do is understand the company culture that you're in and how welcoming they are. And if you have seen other people come out successfully at work, understand what the policies are. And if you don't have clarity, honey, I want you to know just to keep yourself safe so you can keep your job. Because these people do not want to protect you. There will be companies that are going to double down. These companies that are going to double down are going to rename things. They are going to make shifts in the way that DEI is delivered. So if you are finding yourself out of work, you're going to have to be kind of see through the job descriptions on what they're actually looking for, because it may actually be what your skills are. If you are disabled, if you are a veteran, there are still things in place to make sure that you get your reasonable accommodations and that you have the support that you need. But inclusive trainings for leaders of veterans and for leaders of people with disabilities, some of those trainings may go away, but you still have to be able to get the accommodations that you need. The only thing I can see that gets challenged is if your accommodation needs are seen as reasonable or unreasonable. I can see that shifting, but I don't see anything to prove that to be true. So I don't want to just say that to be scary, but I would just get an idea of what a reasonable accommodation is at your work if you need it. If you work in DEI, I just want to let you know that your work matters. It makes an impact. It changes lives. It saves lives. We'll get through this.
I just got fired. I'm in shock. So what they did is I took pictures to defend myself against the person who's been harassing me at work, and it proved that he was harassing me at work, and they fired me for it. You're not allowed to take pictures.
just fired a bunch of trans people. You want to know how I know? She says they were explicit chat rooms with pornography. You want to know what chat rooms they were? They were LGBT support groups. Project 2025 says that the transgender ideology is pornography. They are firing trans people.
Today, I'm not okay. Two days ago, the Supreme Court ruled on the injunction, placed a stay on the injunction that protected trans service members from discharge. Today, Secretary Hegseth released his policy for the DOD. And it outlines and paves the way for discharges to begin within 60 days. Which for me means that a career that I have been working for going on 18 years is going to be stripped away from me within the next 6 months. To have something that you have worked so hard for such a massive portion of your life, dedicating energy and mental stability and missing holidays and birthdays and major life events, to have it taken away for something that is arguably a political act. I've worn my uniform every day since 2013. Every day. Prior to that, I enlisted in 2007. 2 deployments in that time frame. I worked full-time as a technician during that time period. I've done a lot of time. And I did all of it because I knew that at the end of my career, there were going to be benefits that would set me up for success so that I wouldn't have to struggle. I gave up freedoms and choices and things that my friends and those around me, my family, enjoyed. I gave that up because I knew that at the end of my career that something better was coming and it's being taken away. And if you told me it was because I couldn't serve, I'm physically capable of doing this job. I've done it. More than half of my career has been as an out trans person. I have transitioned for the last 9 years of an almost 18-year career. I've been deployable the whole time. I've done my job successfully. I've gotten awards and ribbons and accolades and been successful. If you were to tell me that it was because I'm physically incapable of doing this job, I would accept it. But you're telling someone who is physically capable of doing the job that they are incompatible with military service because of the person that they are. I'm not a perfect person, and I'm not a perfect soldier. But what I do is I strive to put the needs of others before me, before my own needs. And I've done that for a very long time. I have helped grow the force as a recruiter. I've trained thousands of soldiers. I have spoke highly of the military to people who are unsure. I have defended the actions of the DOD. To have the DOD spit in my face. Some of you are going to be happy that we're being discharged. And to you, I'm saying I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you haven't gotten to know soldiers like me and like my friends who want nothing more than to wear the uniform in a time when we are struggling to find people to volunteer to do this. We are begging to be allowed to continue our service, and you're just going to wash us away. So today I'm not okay. And I don't know when I'm going to be okay, because I'm terrified of what comes tomorrow. Because for 18 years, I've put a uniform on and done my job and known what was going to happen almost every day of my career, because that's what this job is. And now I don't even know what the job market looks like in a time when people are already struggling to find work. And all I want to do is just finish my time, do my job. But it's going to be taken away. I'm not okay. But tomorrow I'm going to put my boots on and I'm going to go to work. Because that's what's the right thing to do. And maybe next week, I'll take some time to figure out what I'm going to do in a month. Because I don't know.
So I was one of the thousands of DEI workers who has lost their jobs due to Donald Trump's executive order dismantling DEI. And I shared a video explaining that I had lost an opportunity. I had a DEI contract. It was a small one, but enough to keep me afloat right after I was laid off from my 9-to-5 DEI role. And I was left this comment by Melissa: "You can get a job on merit. It sounds like you have great qualifications." Okay. Now, I do have great qualifications. That's absolutely true. And I know that when you say that I can get a job off of merit, what you're actually saying is that you don't believe that I could have gotten a great job because I'm a Black woman and DEI is in place. So you feel like I don't have merit. You don't care that the center of inclusive hiring is based off of merit. You don't care that hiring is about 5% of what DEI work is focused on. None of that stuff matters to you. So I'm not going to give you any free labor, but I will take this as an opportunity to get some engagement in what's really important, and that's that Donald Trump is getting rid of the Equal Employment Opportunities Act. The Equal Employment Opportunities Act is something that was fought for through the civil rights movement to make sure that everyone, regardless of their background, has an opportunity to apply to a role without discrimination. And that's gone now. And that's really bad for you, Melissa, because the people who benefit from DEI the most is actually white women. Women's programming, women's mentorship and sponsorship programs, listen, done. Okay, and that's just not with the EEO Act. This is also with all the dismantling of DEI in general, but specifically with EEO, when there is a job description that has sexist language, there is nobody that is in place to put together the rubric or the rules to make sure that there isn't sexist language that's used in a job description. There isn't anything that's put in place that prevents women from applying to roles. If there is an issue, maybe there's a department that's all men and they're just throwing away anything that has a woman's name on it. There won't be anything checking to make sure that that doesn't happen anymore. So it will be harder for women to find role, regardless of their experience. And I hope that you aren't a millisecond older than 35, because if you thought that finding a job before because of ageism was an issue, it's gonna be so much harder now. I hope that you're happy, and I hope you get everything that you voted for. Every single thing. Hey Jim, I need you to go ahead and pack your bags because you have just bought one ticket onto the silly goose train because you're actually an advocate for DEI without even realizing that you're an advocate for DEI. Let me tell you something, you glorious DEI champion you. If you are hiring a lot of Black and brown people because of their qualifications and what they bring to the table versus whatever their demographic is, that's what DEI is about. It's making sure that there aren't any boundaries for those people to apply to the jobs that you have open. If you are hiring a lot of Black and brown people, it means that there is an opportunity for Black and brown people to get these roles. So you have something that's put in place so that the roles are attractive regardless of what somebody's background is. A lot of companies don't have that and they can't get through the door because there are barriers for them to get into these positions. If you don't have that, you're doing your job and DEI is baked into the process. Yes? Also, Jim, I see that you have served for the Navy. DEI serves veterans and people who are active duty that are on reserves. They make sure that there isn't discrimination that is baked into hiring or in the business overall. So I have done things like put together military and veteran families ERG groups. I have supported veterans putting together community events and have helped pack food for homeless veterans. That has been put under the DEI umbrella. While veterans are protected from discrimination, discrimination still happens, and that will get escalated through HR, but it is me, the person in DEI, that does the training for hiring managers to let them know some of the things that they may be doing that is going to push against a veteran applying for a job. Or telling somebody, hey, you actually can't say that you don't want to escalate someone because you're afraid that they're going to have PTSD just because you saw that they have served. Also, if you ever hire somebody just because of their skin color, their gender, whatever, it's baked in bias. And it's also a lot of the time trying to like maybe hit a quota or something. It's illegal. It's against the law, Jim. I wouldn't tell you to do that anyway. It's been illegal for years. It's just so funny because so many people have no idea that they're actually very pro DEI. It's just that they have no idea what DEI actually is. And you shouldn't speak on something that you don't understand. Please Google what DEI is, Jim. Today's the day. I believe in you. You go on, you little silly goose. Make it happen.
Would you re-enlist today?
Absolutely not. I'm retired military. I had a 20-year career in the Air Force.
Can I ask why?
I actually made it quite high in leadership in the military, and what I'm seeing now is not what I was brought up on. We're watching the United States being ripped apart piece by piece while military leaders stand by idly, removing DEI, taking away historic leaders, whether it be women, people of color. DEI touches every facet of our lives, whether it's ableism, socioeconomic policies. People have weaponized DEI as a word for their political gain. However, they're not realizing a lot of people that we see in our workforce are DEI hires, whether it's a woman, whether it's a minority, whether you're 50 years old. Those are the things that DEI has afforded you, and a lot of people take that for granted.
I live in Maryland, and if you've been paying attention at all, you know that the government workers getting laid off is significantly affecting the Maryland, Virginia, D.C. area, among other states, but being hit pretty hard here. And I have a family member that works in the Office of Naval Intelligence in DC, and they let me know this morning that thankfully they are not fired, but 150 people in their office were told yesterday that they're being fired, and they have until today, end of day, to clear out and remove themselves from the office. Cruelty is the point with these people. They don't realize that those are people with families, mortgages, car payments, groceries to buy, and they were just told yesterday that they don't have a job and they have to remove themselves from the office today. Another text that I got from my family member said because of those people that were fired, they can no longer protect the Navy from their office. So let that sink in a little bit, that the person that you voted for put things into motion that ultimately made the Navy less protected. So if that's what MAGA means, I'm really starting to wonder, are we great yet?
Hello, TikTok. This is day 3 of being a terminated VA employee on probation. I started my career with the VA in 2014, going on almost 11 years in May. It's kind of surreal, not, knowing the certainty of what's going on. Tomorrow is going to be weird, just for the fact that I normally would be working, and I've been let go for being a probationary employee. How I got to being a probationary employee is I had a promotion, and the new position was a probationary status employee for my promotion. I was due to get off probation this year. However, that did not take place due to the Trump administration terminating thousands of federal employees. So, yeah, I'm just going to make the best of it, try to see what my recourse is, if I could get my job back, if I apply for a new position with the VA, or find another job outside of the VA. There's a lot of unknown, but I'm taking it day by day, keep my head up, and doing the best I can.
Instead of continuing to talk about tariffs, I want to tell you all about LIHEAP and about how the entire staff of this program has been fired. And if you don't know what LIHEAP is the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. It is a program staffed by about 25 people, okay, that helps over 6 million people in the United States keep their homes cool in the summer and their homes warm in the winter. It is for low income people, and it's been gutted. There's about $400 million worth of funding that is still left to help people this summer, but once that money's used up, I mean, it's done. The whole staff has been fired. I guess the program's been canceled. I don't actually know if the program has literally been canceled, but I mean, like, the ability of this program to be administered is gone. I mean, if people need help with their energy bill this summer, who are relying on this program, they're SOL. They have no one to talk to. There's nobody to even pick up the phones. 6 million people, man. How many working families are just going to be SOL and literally have to sweat out their entire summer? How many little kids are going to have to watch their parents who work hard every single day come home and have no respite, not be able to sleep well? How many little kids are going to have sleepless nights because they're going to be baking in their rooms? How many grandparents? How many old people who have worked hard their entire life just to make a meager living in retirement, if they even have that luxury, are going to die because they are sensitive to heat? People who live in states like Arizona, in southern Texas, in Louisiana, in Mississippi, in Alabama, in Georgia, in the Carolinas, how many millions of people are just condemned to literal hell this summer? And if they survive it and they live in these states, especially with how the climate has been really weird in the last few years, there's all these freeze outs that are happening. How about in the winter, man? Like, for what? Nothing. For nothing.
The DMV area job market is saturated, it's struggling. I just came back from a DMV area career fair and it was so packed. I did not imagine how packed it would be. To give you some context, this was a career fair put together by Congressman Don Bayer for impacted federal employees and contractors. They expected a few hundred, however, 2,000 job seekers showed up. I spent 1 hour in line to talk to Google today.
my back was aching. But at least I got to chat it up with people because I was, I had nothing to do but wait in line. And to just see that many people packed in a room in similar situations, based on the conversations I was having, a lot of us were in similar situations. And it's just so unfortunate. I'm speechless.
You couldn't. So I think I'm being laid off from my job today. If you couldn't tell by my appearance, I have been crying all morning. I haven't even had my meeting yet, but I got a calendar meeting today from someone I've never spoken to at the company, and a bunch of other people did too. So I am recording this because I feel like a lot of people can probably find comfort in knowing they're not alone. So we will see. Maybe it'll be something positive. Maybe I'm not getting laid off, but I am shaking.
That does impact your position. Today is going to be your last day.
I've loved my time here and I'm very thankful for it. So I appreciate it. I did not think that that would be my last day. My laptop's not even working anymore for me to save things.
Hello.
Hey, Simone, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Hey, thanks for making time on short notice. I'm sure my invite was rattling and not awesome, and you do not have to turn your camera on if you don't want to. I have a couple of notes to share with you, but I'll be glad to have those notes to make sure I cover things. But I will also follow up with an email, so you don't have to retain everything I'm going to say. I made the difficult decision to restructure the XD org, and as a result, reduce the size of the org. And unfortunately, you're impacted by this change. So your last working day is today, but the good news is you'll be paid through February 2nd. Those are the most important pieces of information. Your system access as an employee will be turned off at some point today. I'm not sure when exactly.
I am still shocked how many people in my comment sections are underestimating how cooked the corporate job market is. I've been in recruiting for coming up to a decade in July, and I've literally never seen candidates struggle as much as they are right now on the job market. And these are not poor candidates. These are not people who are unqualified. These are some of the most qualified people I've ever seen on the job market, and they are struggling. I'm hearing about people who are applying to thousands of jobs and not hearing anything back from any company. I'm hearing about longer and longer rounds of interviews, like 6, 7, 8, or 9 rounds of interviews. And some people go through that and then they get ghosted. I'm hearing about assessments, like personality assessments, take-home work, which a lot of times is unpaid. And I'm hearing about this over and over. And then when it comes to the offer stage, I am seeing people get intentionally lowballed. Like they ask for $85K and the company comes back with $65K. And I know what the company is thinking. They're thinking, if this person doesn't accept, somebody else is desperate enough to accept, and we can get a deal. We can literally get somebody really talented for cheap. Welcome to the 2025 job market.
I'm so sad I'm going to start watching reality TV. That may not seem like a big deal, but this is a low point for me.
A pilot got on here and said, hey, it's hard for me to find a job. A pilot. The nigga who flies planes.
How am I supposed to compete
With niggas who are flying planes.
if they can't find a job? What?
Makes you think I'm finding one?
So I just found out I'm getting laid off in 3 weeks, and my boss doesn't know that I know and isn't planning on letting any of us know until the business actually closes. So drop your recommendations for what petty fun I can have in the workplace until I don't have a job anymore.
I got to pay bills, I got to pay child support, I got to go to court next week. What I'm supposed to do?
Today we let the employees know at our Emporia, Virginia plywood mill that we are ceasing operations as of today.
I've worked here 3.5 years.
It's very unsettling. It's very unsettling. Because I have 5 young kids at home. It's very heartfelt because I feel bad for the city of Emporia. I really do, because it's going to crush Emporia.
It's going to cripple this town. You just lost Boar's Head, then lost GP. Ain't going to be nothing left here.
This a loss for me. And then they shut down Boar's Head. I was just about to start at Boar's Head. They shut Boar's Head down. Now they done shut this place down. What jobs do we have in Emporia?
We want to get these people placed in new jobs as soon as possible. It's very tough for the Emporia area with the Boar's Head plant a while back and now Georgia Pacific, but we're committed to trying to find those people jobs in and around that area and work to bring companies into that area to pick up some of that job loss.
You guys, we here at Midas Touch have just obtained exclusive leaked audio of Winsome Earl Sears. She is the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, and at an event on March 13th, she told people she doesn't understand why everybody is so upset that people keep losing their jobs because of DOGE. Because you know what? People lose their jobs all the time. Listen to this exclusive audio, spread the word. Remember, Abigail Spanberger is the Democrat running for governor in Virginia. And remember to listen to the Midas Touch podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify for more.
Now, I'm hearing about DOGE and all of that, and yes, we don't want folks to lose their jobs. We have over 250,000 jobs that we've created since we've been in office. So, if you've lost your job, and how many here has ever lost a job? Oh, you mean it's not unusual? It happens to everybody all the time? Okay. And the media is making it out to be this huge, huge thing. And I don't understand why.
I can't help but notice that all the labor leaders, like Sean O'Brien from the Teamsters, who supported Donald Trump in this last election, are completely quiet today as Trump takes away collective bargaining rights from TSA agents. These are federal workers who are serving their country. Even if you don't like going through TSA, and Lord knows I do not, they deserve the same collective bargaining rights as anyone else. It is completely and totally messed up that Donald Trump is trying to take their rights away from them. And it's even more messed up that Sean O'Brien and other labor leaders like him who supported Trump are completely and totally quiet today. They are complete and absolute cowards.
Hey MAGA, how's that drill baby drill going? We're shutting down American rigs. Not drill baby drill, we're shutting down American rigs. This is making us worse, less dependent. Are you fucking serious? This guy is ruining everything.
I don't even know what the fuck be doing. Like, I be doing everything right. I swear I be doing everything right. I be coming to work. I don't be calling out. I be the best employee in the whole wide world. And I still be getting fired.
So yes, my husband lost a job with the federal government after 16 years. People are saying there's all sorts of benefits that he can benefit from. Here's the problem. He was technically in a probationary period because he went from one government agency to a new government agency in October. So those 16 years of service just somehow didn't count. During a technical probation period, you can be fired for anything. He took this job so that he could be more available to help my disabled son get on the bus for school. Oh, but wasn't he offered that buyout? And now people are reporting that they didn't qualify for the buyout, even though they still resigned, which is what multiple lawyers advised us. That offer for the buyout looked so sketchy. There was no point of contact. There was nothing personal about it. There was nothing for him to sign, no agency that he could hold legally accountable. There wasn't a contract. So if you're happy that my husband got immediately terminated with no severance and no pension after 16 years of his government job, if you're glad he got fired because he's part of the waste, fraud, and abuse, he spent those entire 16 years advocating for you, the taxpayer, making sure that whoever got those government contracts was giving them the absolute best price and that it was the best decision on behalf of the taxpayer. And he took pride in doing that. But here we are.
To feel the vibe, I ain't stressing today. Yo, I ain't stressing today. Bounce. You negative, but I ain't got time. I ain't stressing today. Yo, I ain't stressing today. Bounce. Peace and love is on my mind. I ain't stressing today. Yeah.
So today something happened. My boss sent me a text and asking me if I got a meeting invite for 9 a.m. this morning. Then we met, and then there's been like a lot of changes in our business. Then she said, unfortunately, your job has been impacted as well. So after 19 official years, 2 years as a temp, so 21 years at my company, I am officially laid off. And it was a shock, but it is an opportunity now because I feel like everything happens for a reason, and God puts us in places where might seem like we're uncomfortable, but it's because you need to move. So I'm excited about my future. I'm happy and grateful for the 21 years at my old company. We'll see how it goes from here.
We're in the middle of a hostile government takeover. I wanna talk about it, but I'll be late for work. And if you say wait a minute.
If we learn nothing else from this year, can we just agree to stop perpetuating a myth that being a businessman or CEO somehow makes you a better leader for the government? Because if this year's proved anything, it's clearly not true. Like, it really never made sense if you thought about it, because the point of a business is to make profit selling a product or service, which is fine in itself. But the point of a government is to maintain order in society and to protect its people against foreign and domestic enemies. And there's a lot of things you need to do to maintain society that don't generate profit. They're not supposed to generate profit, and that's fine. Like, it's not supposed to be profitable to maintain roads. It's not supposed to generate a profit to have a post office or to have a police force or healthcare or firefighters. There's a lot of things that they're supposed to be there because it's beneficial for all of society, including businesses. And the moment you start turning things that shouldn't turn a profit into profitable businesses, we get something like the US healthcare system. Versus like having the US Postal Service, at least there's a public option, so the private companies can't have a monopoly and make you pay like $10,000 to send a letter to your family. It's nice to have having this mantra of like free market and this idea that somehow running like a large company, I feel like that's part of what led to where we're at right now. And that's why we're having all these problems of all the funding being cut. And I feel like in the US, we've been a developed country, for lack of a better word, for such a long time with all these processes and systems that people take for granted because they've just always been there, that we don't realize how much we depend on them until suddenly they're going to be gone. And nobody wants to be paying like a private company to protect your house from catching on fire. That's not going to go well. I mean, putting business people in charge of the government seems to have only like perpetuated the myth of it's not business, it's just personal. No, it's never been just business. It's always personal. It's always people's lives you're messing with. And now that they're in charge, it's just going to amplify that way more. I guess my point is, just because you got the government telling they're saving you millions of dollars, don't think that's going to be a good thing. There's some things that it's better to have in place because it's better to have a system to protect you from things or to have just in case of certain things than it is to have just a random payment of $6,000. No. We just got to get it together and stop letting ourselves get gaslit by businesses and our nation's leaders, because politics and running a society is not a team sport, guys. We can do better than this.
So am I the only one wondering where all these people who are losing their jobs with the government are going? This is the worst job market we've had in a long time. Who's hiring them?
In today's episode of Any Day Now, Lord, any day, I'm a federal employee who applied for unemployment after I was terminated. And I just found out I'm supposed to certify on Monday so I can get paid this week coming, but my application is still sitting there because the federal government will not respond to the state asking for them to verify my income. So not only did they fire us and take away our health insurance, our life insurance, our vision, and our dental all in one day, but they're also dragging their feet. Well, it's not even dragging their feet, being completely unresponsive and doing what they need to do so that we can file for unemployment benefits. So yeah. Any day now, Lord. Any day.
Dear current federal employees,
for the love of God, download 5 leave and earning statements and send them to your personal email. I downloaded 4. I didn't know 5 was the magic number when I got fired. I downloaded 4. But DC unemployment cannot process my claim unless I send 5. And the amount of back and forth and craziness I am going through in order to get the last and final leave and earning statement is insane. The Department of the Interior is going to process my request in a 1 week-ish because they've received like 1 million claims, understand. Or I can go on Employee Express myself, but without my PIV card or access to my government email, I can't actually access Employee Express unless they mail a code to my physical home address. So whenever the federal government gets around to mailing me a code to get into Employee Express, I'll just be over here without my final leave and earning statement.
Oh my gosh. I literally just woke up. Carla Hayden has been fired as the Librarian of Congress, which is like the chief librarians of all librarians for the United States. She used to be the head librarian at, oh my gosh, she was the head librarian of Baltimore, our system here, and really helped the system a lot. Let me read. I mean, there's nothing to read though. Wait, how can, but he didn't appoint, wait, I'm confused about how, hold on.
I'm Oleg Shmura.
I am Dr. Ben Andrew.
My name's Cody Anderson.
My name is Katie Sandlin.
My name is Andrew Lennox.
My name is Nick Hand.
I'm Riley Ratcliffe.
My name is Jonathan Cammons. I oversaw cybersecurity for the VA.gov websites, and about a third of USDS, including me, were fired last week. Without people like me ensuring that VA.gov is secure, the private financial and healthcare data of Americans' veterans is at risk of being stolen, sold to the highest bidder, and used to harm people.
We are standing in Yosemite National Park. For the past 10 months, I was a custodial worker here. I picked diapers off the side of the road, toilet paper, beer bottles, cigarette butts, you name it, so you didn't have to see it.
And I served as the Chief of Safety and Emergency Management at the Philadelphia VA. This was a mission-critical role that ensured the health and safety of all those who entered into our facilities.
I used to be a NEPA coordinator for the Wrangell Ranger District of the USDA Forest Service, where I would coordinate environmental review for projects in and around the town of Wrangell, projects that are crucial to the town's economy and its people.
I moved from Alabama to Maryland to start my new job in genomics education and outreach at the National Institutes of Health. My job was to help educate students, teachers, and healthcare providers about genomics to improve patient care and develop the future scientific workforce.
I was a technologist at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau for about 1.5 years before I was fired last week. We were the ones making sure that you could use payment apps without being constantly scammed, that your sensitive financial data wasn't being collected and shared with shady companies, and that your data wouldn't be leaked in a data breach.
As the only aquatic ecologist at the largest reservoir in the United States, my job was mostly to monitor for water quality for recreational uses, making sure that when people are out boating or swimming, that the water quality is sufficient to keep people healthy.
After leaving the military, I wanted to continue serving my country, and I did so as an administrative officer at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Ann Arbor, Michigan. My job was to enable our medical providers, and that meant looking at the hundreds of doctors and the thousands of patients' schedules to make sure that nobody walked through those doors and was not treated. Make sure that we had all the paperwork and credentialing to send those veterans home with the prescription medication that they needed. And we didn't waste a single taxpayer dollar.
I went into public service because I wanted to use my tech expertise to make an impact. A lot of the time, I was seeing a skill set like mine be used to make more money for big tech companies at the expense of everyday people. And I wanted to try to help level that playing field.
I went into public service because I'm passionate about helping others learn science and to also give back to a country that has given so much to me.
I joined the Park Service because I believe that the national parks are one of the best ways that we can share America with everyone.
I chose public service because my mother worked 30 years for the VA Medical Center in New Orleans. As a kid, I said one day I'll work at the VA.
I got into this job because I'm not in it for the money. I don't make that much money, but what I do believe in is the National Park Service and our mission to protect these beautiful and insanely unique monuments to the rest of the world.
If they offered me my job back tomorrow, I would take it, despite all the chaos and risk. The mission is still there, and I'm still ready to be a part of it.
We're not deep state actors. We're not faceless bureaucrats. I'm a veteran that wants to help veterans. That's why people join the federal service. They do it to help others and serve their country. This is the face of the federal agencies.
So I've been seeing on my TikTok how so many people have been getting laid off, with federal jobs just across the board, right? And I'm sitting here like, this won't happen to me. I'm not a federal employee. I work for a medical equipment company that's based in Ohio. They just laid us off and offered us severance packages. I didn't even make a year, y'all. I just had left Apple as a supervisor, a tier 2 supervisor, because this job offered, had great benefits. I'm not one of those that's going to come on here and cry, so I'm really holding back tears. I'm not one of those that cry on the internet, y'all, but what's going on is real, and I don't know what's going on, but
U.S. Postal Service signed an agreement with the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, in preparation to cut its workforce by 10,000 employees. In a letter to Congress, Postmaster General Louis DeJoy said there will be voluntary buyouts within the next 30 days. The Postal Service has roughly 600,000 workers. The agency has been exempt from the Trump administration's efforts to downsize the federal government.
Here's 5 things you need to know about the United States Postal Service slashing 10,000 jobs. Let's get into it. 1. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy plans to partner with DOGE to cut 10,000 jobs. 2. DOGE is said to be assisting USPS in handling what has been characterized as big problems. Some of the problems cited include the mismanagement of the agency's retirement assets, as well as the workers' compensation plan and regulatory requirements that restrict normal business practices. 3. Critics fear that such a move will result in the undermining and privatizing of our postal system. It has been alleged that Americans who live in rural and hard-to-reach areas will feel the hardest impact of this move. The Americans in the rural areas rely heavily on the Postal Service to deliver their mail, their medications, and their voting ballots. 4. The USPS plans to implement these 10,000 job cuts within the next 30 days through a voluntary retirement program. Right now, it's unclear if these 10,000 workers have been offered a lucrative buyout, and if so, how much. And 5. Inquiring minds want to know what privatizing the post office would mean or what it would look like. It could mean steep rate hikes, reduced service frequency, and it would look more like a FedEx or a UPS. And most interestingly, it would be profit-driven and free from regulatory constraints. Cash would rule everything around it. And as with anything in America, if you want to know the truth, follow the money.
So we are about to be affected, probably. So all I have to say is, for those who enjoy putting a stamp on a letter that could go anywhere in the world for 73 cents, about to change. For those that like to ship all these shipping goods that they sell online for a low cost, about to change. Everything is about to change, and I'm just sitting here like Trump, like, It's about to be a real year for a lot of folks.
You made a fool of me. Tell me why.
14 top officials at Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae were fired. Research and statistics and fair equal employment divisions were all put on leave. It equates to 10% of the workforce there. HUD let go of 50% of its workforce. That's over 4,000 people. The FHA also let go of 50% of their people. Many are speculating that all of the programs that are used to keep foreclosures on the books that we've been talking about for months, where people haven't been making any payments and they just put the payments at the end of the contract, are coming to an end. They don't have the workforce that it takes to maintain that. It has not officially been announced, but many are speculating this is going in that direction. A lot of these were termed after DOGE came in and ran some numbers. All signs pointing to one of the biggest real estate crashes in our history.
Federal layoffs are now impacting the IRS, where even people in the private sector is impacted. I'm in investment banking, but I'm specifically in finance, handling tax, like the tax return for the investment bank. That's what my team handles. Also, advisory work, where if any of your investment products, we make sure that we understand the tax implications for that product. So hear me out. I now have previous colleagues of mine reaching out to me on LinkedIn saying, hey, I left Morgan Stanley, or I left Citigroup, or I left the accounting firm where I worked at for years, decided to go work for the IRS, because that's normally what a lot of us in our field will do at some point in our career. They've been working at the IRS for years, or maybe just a few months, and they just got laid off. Full transparency, one of my long-term goals is eventually working for the IRS. Why? Leaving the private sector and working for the IRS, my work-life balance, I know immediately would be so much better. Working for the private sector, it's client-facing. And if you work at an accounting firm, you have to bring in revenue. Like at an investment bank, I'm still making sure that I maintain the relationship with the client. So there is almost like an incentive for me to make sure I continuously perform appropriately. Not to say that at the IRS, I don't have that incentive, but it's less client-facing and more like a regulatory board. At the tail end of my career, that just feels and sounds a lot better. I went to a tax conference recently, and many of us are like, hey, we wanted to make the business case this year that we need to hire more people to manage a lot of the audits that we're going through, or just a lot of the tax things that we need to take care of. And our goal was to say, hey, this is the amount of work coming out of the IRS, and we need appropriate staff. So now I can no longer communicate that business need. So one, I can't hire anyone. Now that the existing work that we have, the existing staff, you're kind of going to be drowning, because the same amount of work is going to be produced out of the IRS, although they're producing the same amount of work with the less staff. The same amount of work is going to have to be done in the private sector to accommodate those same requirements by the IRS. I think a lot of people didn't see, or maybe they didn't understand, like these CEOs going into the federal government, they're essentially going to be running the federal government like any organization, right? And what a lot of CEOs do, or a lot of management team do, is they cut where the work is still required, and if it's a 5-person task, then only 2 people are going to be doing that task now. So you're going to be understaffed, right? That's what's going to happen immediately. And at the same time, they also have what is called a relocation strategy. And I think today or yesterday, I saw that another one of the strategies that the new administration is going to use is removing a lot of the functions out of DC and moving it to a cheaper state. And I know you see cheaper state right now, but I'm telling you, coming from the private sector, they don't only go to a cheaper state. These major corporations, they go to a cheaper country. The same exact recipe that is being used in the private sector is the same exact recipe that is about to be used in the federal sector to make things more efficient. And people are like, yeah, it's too big. It's too big. It's too big? That means they're going to cut, just like the private sector, and they won't give 2 shits about you. But, you know, I love the way people voted.
Are you a federal employee on probation under a year and you signed up for the deferred resignation program? Let's compare notes. Okay, my whole department was just fired on the 20th. I signed up for this program weeks ago, but I have had no information in regards to if I was accepted or if I was ineligible. I was expecting to be ineligible when everybody was fired in my department. I was surprised that they told me that I wasn't fired or let go until the 28th of this month. Now they have no other information. There was a few other people in my department that took the deal, and they have no information either. There's no you're accepted or whatever, we're working on it. The first time that we heard about it was when they fired everybody and they said that we're not going home. And so do you have any information on your end? I'm expecting that like this week we're going to get a notification saying that we're ineligible and then we're fired like the rest of them, but I don't know. So do you know anything?
I was a Trump supporter. You know, when he talks about government waste and all that, yes, I'm behind it. I believe there is a lot of stuff in the government that needs fixing. And that's part of the reason why I actually wanted to work for the government, actually, to help change the things that are wrong in the world, you know? And I thought that someone with like his business acumen would have come in with a fine-tooth comb and actually found it, instead of coming in with a wrecking ball and destroying people's lives for no reason.
So I was been supposed to get y'all an update. I tried to do it earlier, but for some reason my stuff was deleted. I was trying to show y'all how it looked when I got off the L. It was ABC News outside. It was Channel 10 News outside. Homeland Security outside of the building. When I went up there, basically everybody that was in there was printing out paperwork. Like, it was chaotic. Like, all the printers was taken up because everybody was using printers. Using the printers to print out all their paperwork that they needed. But when we got down to it, we had to turn in all our stuff after a while because I was sitting around BSing because I was waiting for a few more of my coworkers to come in that I wanted to say goodbye to or whatever. We was over there talking, doing our regular thing, you know. One of our leads kept crying, making us emotional, and we was trying not to cry. But at the end, because we had to get escorted out after we turned in our badge and everything, we was escorted out the building. But for the most, like, it was sad. It definitely was sad leaving. It was not even sad leaving. It was sad leaving the people that I grew to like. I made some connections, a lot of connections in there. Were real good people. I learned a lot in there, and I don't take none of that for granted. It's just messed up that it ended the way it ended. So, yeah.
Well, this is it, y'all. I have officially been laid off from the IRS per the executive order from Donald Trump.
So I'm gonna put you down for a while.
2025, I'm gonna need a refund because this year sucks already. I just got laid off for basically the second time back to back. If you didn't know, I worked at Twitter and I got laid off when Elon Musk acquired the company. Since then, I've been working at a like a content strategy agency type place as a director of strategy, and I just got laid off yesterday. It's surreal because I definitely didn't want to go through another layoff. Being laid off the first time was one of the most traumatic events that have ever happened to me, especially because it happened so publicly. This time was obviously a little bit different, but the company lost some clients and now here I am without a job. It's hard not to reevaluate my life choices at this point. I work in tech, and so I'm wondering if that's still what I should be doing. It's hard to feel like secure in a job anymore. It feels like those days are over. So I don't know if I should be in tech anymore or working this corporate life. I love the security of having a stable job, but that hasn't been the case for quite some time for me because it's just been so unstable in the industry. So I'm considering other options, obviously. I had a wild idea. I think somebody on TikTok said, hey, become an ultrasound tech. That takes like 2 years of schooling and then you're in. And I was like, sounds good to me. But again, I also really enjoyed my job doing marketing, strategy, working in the digital space, working with tech. It is fast-paced and it's very exciting. So I honestly don't know what to do. If you have any advice for me, I would love to friggin' hear it, because I'm swirling. This all happened yesterday. So I've been like waffling between panic applying to places and just rotting on the couch. Would love something more constructive to do with my time. But if you have any advice, any tips, any job leads or connections, please let me know. I'm in the Bay Area, remote work, anything. I want to be busy. I'm somebody who likes to do things. So this is my plea to you, TikTok. Thank you so much.
Out that I'm getting laid off. I'm angry, annoyed, feeling very unappreciated, anxious, excited, but still very emotional. No one wants to invest this much time and energy into a job to just be told you served your purpose, basically, and we're done with it. We're done with your store. We're done with your team. Move on. Don't get me wrong. Whenever I have something like this happen, I always bounce back 10 times better, 10 times stronger. If you've been laid off, like, how was it for you? How did you handle it? Because this is not for the weak.
That moment whenever you commute 45 minutes and go into the office just to find out that you're being let go. That was me today, literally like 2 hours ago. Yeah, I got let go, and this is my first time being let go. And surprisingly, I am not mad. I am not angry. I might be a little upset and sad just because I transitioned my career and I was, within this new department for 6 months. Originally, I've been with the company for 6 years. But within my new position, 6 months, because I transitioned from accounting and finance to digital marketing / social media. And yeah, so it just came to me as a surprise, but at the same time, I knew that people were getting let go. And so I knew, oh my gosh, it can potentially be me. Like, you never know. It could be me. The thought ran across my head, but I didn't think that it would happen so soon. I don't feel mad. I don't feel angry. I know these things happen. I mean, that is the risk that I take with working in corporate America, is that potentially you are just a number and you can be let go like that. So I'm just grateful for it all. I really am. Like, to be able to transition my career from accounting and finance to social media and to gain experience within these 6 months, like, to me, that was just everything. I went on my first work trip. I literally was recording content, creating videos, doing all the things that brought me so much joy and getting paid for it. Like, to me, that was just awesome. And I'm just overall grateful for the opportunity within itself. I'm grateful that my manager took a chance on me and hiring me. And, I'm just looking forward to the next big thing, which is ultimately all I can do. I can either be mad and angry about what's going on, or I can just be optimistic and realize this is the situation that is currently handed to me, and I can be pessimistic about it, or I can move forward, realize it, and continue. Not sure if those other sentiments just haven't hit me yet. Maybe they'll hit me tomorrow when I have nothing to do. But at the same time, like I said, I'm just grateful for everything. I'm grateful for the experience. I'm grateful for the time that I had at the company. My manager was great. My team was great. I can't say anything negative about them because they really were great people. It really is just the company itself that just wasn't doing so well. And I just get it. Like, I understand. I'm gonna spend some more time to myself. I'm going to work on a couple of projects that I've always been wanting to work on, just haven't had the time to. And I'm just going to use this time to reflect and, gather all the things that I need to do to start applying to new jobs. And I'm, just hopeful. I'm hopeful for the next big thing that's to come. I'm hopeful for this new beginning. This was an amazing chapter, 6 years of my life into a company, and unfortunately it just closed. Life does not stop for anyone. Got to move forward onto what's to come and persevere and just do the best that we can. So everything will be okay. You know, I've always believed in what's meant for you is meant for you. God makes you go through things and he gives you something better in return. You know, sometimes he takes away from you and gives you something better in return as well. So I'm very hopeful for what's to come. Unfortunately, I'm not looking forward to applying in this job market right now, but you know, what can you do? So I'm just gonna remain positive on what's to come and pues a seguirle adelante.
I keep seeing a lot of comments on my post and other posts that says the job market is great because everywhere is hiring. That's a lie. As the hiring manager for my work, we are required to put those now hiring signs out whether we are hiring or not. And it is because the corporations, the big huge umbrella, get a tax break whenever they're constantly hiring. Because if they are always hiring, then that means that they're never filling their hired quota, which means that they need a tax break because they can't fill their slots. I know this because we are, again, required to have the now hiring sign on our door at all times. And we haven't been hiring or had a position to hire for in like 6 to 8 months. I currently have over 300 applications of people applying because they think we're hiring, and I can't do anything with them. So when you see comments about, don't worry, there's 17 million jobs available, and if you get laid off of a job, you can get another one, and the job market's not that bad, it's all bullshit. It's all a lie. Because the large corporations get tax cuts when they are hiring. Now, again, this is usually like larger corporations with hundreds of locations nationwide. So if you see a small town shop that's only in your store that has a now hiring sign, that is probably legitimate. But if you go into like a big fast food place or a big retail store and it says now hiring, the chances of them actually hiring are very, very slim.
I just got laid off about an hour ago. I cried for a while, and I think the hardest part about it is I loved my job, I cared so much, but like knowing that you put your full effort towards something and then feeling like they decided it wasn't enough or it wasn't worth enough. Like right now I feel just very like not even undervalued, because I clearly am not valued, but like that all of my effort wasn't good enough, or it wasn't important, or it wasn't relevant. I got laid off today, and it's just, I don't know, and LA is burning and their fires are everywhere, and I got laid off and I don't have a job. So like in perspective, it's not that big of a deal. There's other jobs, but it goes so much deeper than not having a job. So yeah, I don't know. I'm jobless.
I work with whistleblowers, and today I worked with the former information security lead for va.gov, so the system through which a lot of our veterans access their benefits. This man named Jonathan Kamens had been at the USDS, the US Digital Services, and was working on modernizing technology for the government, turned down lucrative jobs in venture capital and tech because he didn't want to just be enriching venture capitalists, to try and work for the government and help people, especially veterans. So, as I'm sure you can imagine, he handled a lot of sensitive data, including veteran medical data. He was outspoken about DOGE and concerned that a lot of government data was in the hands of people who hadn't been background checked, people who go by big balls on the internet and are 20 years old and haven't actually had a lot of experience. So he spoke out on a government forum that presumably his supervisors read, because on Valentine's Day, he, along with around 40 other people, were fired, but he was the only engineer who was fired after speaking up about what had happened, what was going on with DOGE. And what he has to say is really interesting to everyone. It should be very interesting to everyone, especially veterans, which is that with no information security as it relates to veterans' medical data, a lot of stuff can actually go really wrong. For example, If someone has access to the therapy notes of a veteran, and the veteran is talking about erectile dysfunction or the fact that he has a mistress and, you know, in addition to a wife, things that are meant to be private and like covered by patient-doctor confidentiality, those things can be used to shame people, to humiliate them, to blackmail them. You know, there are a lot of ways in which people getting access to that data can really screw with a lot of things. So if you care about veterans and people who served for their country and them being able to have privacy, this is not the best person to fire. And he had a lot of control over keeping information safe, and that was his North Star. He had no other political desires or quests for power or anything. So yeah, if you think that veterans deserve to have safe information, you should share this video.
In a brand new interview, billionaire philanthropist Bill Gates telling the FT this, quote, "The picture of the world's richest man killing the world's poorest children is not a pretty one." The FT reports this, quote, "Gates said Musk had canceled grants to a hospital in Gaza province, Mozambique, that prevents women transmitting HIV to their babies in the mistaken belief that the U.S. was supplying condoms to Hamas in Gaza in the Middle East. Quote, I'd love for him to go in and meet the children that have now been infected with HIV because he cut that money." Bill Gates announced plans to step up where Trump and Musk have pulled away, with plans to spend more than $200 billion on global health in the next 20 years. Gates also expanded on his comments in an interview with Stephen Colbert last night. Watch.
I've been out in the field with the people who work for USAID and seen, you know, the brilliant work they do and how important that is. Unfortunately, you know, there was a weekend where it was decided they were criminals and they were put in the wood chipper. And so we lost a lot of capacity there. Now, we can get it back. Eventually, Congress is the one who will have the final word on this. And even I'm not even sure the administration understands, you know, what's going on in the field, because we do have, for the first time in 25 years, we have more children dying. Instead of it going down, it's now going up. And unless we reverse pretty quickly, that'll be over 1 million additional deaths.
And you lay some of this at the feet of DOGE and, of course, Elon Musk. And I hope I'm getting this even close here. You said the picture of the world's richest man being involved in the death of the world's poorest is not a pretty one.
That's right.
Well said. Well said.
In a brand new interview.
And I was just thinking about how when I used to be a conservative and we would have like conversations or narratives around the idea of, like, for instance, government contracts. And the idea was that we wanted to try to avoid what we thought was like an inherent like corruption in the aspect of government contracts by encouraging a situation where basically like firms, independent firms would put in bids and compete for government contracts. Like that was the idea that was always expressed, you know, I thought by people who were conservative. And it's been really interesting watching that get flushed down the toilet by conservatives for Elon Musk, because we have a situation where a rich man has purchased his way into the White House, and now he's conducting a audit, right, where conveniently enough, the solution to every single problem that he's finding, right, seems to be that he should just take it over and his independent firms should now run and privatize whatever the said job is that the public sector was doing, and that it should just be bequeathed to him, right? And that's not corrupt. He's the one running the audits. And he's the one who's benefiting from the solution that, oh, we should just hand every piece over to him. Oh, you don't like the FFA or the FAA is not running very efficiently? No problem. Elon Musk will take it over. What about NOAA? You don't like, oh, the weather service? Oh, really? That should be privatized. Oh, don't worry. Elon Musk will take it over. Oh, you don't like, oh, gee, Elon Musk is like, oh, how about this over here? I'll just take this over too. I'll just take that over too. And he's putting his people in charge. Like, he's placing his employees from his independent private firms into all of these positions. So I'm kind of wondering, like, shouldn't other companies be creating lawsuits saying, wait a minute here, these things should have been put out into the stratosphere, and it should have been these essentially government contracts should have been open to bids by other private enterprises to see who would get the contracts. But now the Republicans are sanctioning, or they're supporting basically this idea that, this rich guy bought his way in, and therefore he has the right to take whatever he wants. This rich guy is loyal to my guy that I love, and therefore he has the right to take anything that he wants. Like, that's the principle that we're operating now. And it's pretty far away from the one that we always used to discuss, and the one that we always used to say was kind of more of a free market, less corrupt, or a way to try to get away from corruption, way of dealing with this whole situation. It's pretty mind-blowing. But, what we're watching is what used to be the conservative party of our country is going towards the idea of they just want a dictator now. Like, they're all in. They're like, fuck it, we don't care. They're like slapping, the Constitution right in its face. Our founding fathers, they've given the whole, they've drank the Kool-Aid. Like, they're all in. They're all in. And somehow that's not corruption, though. It's just been astonishing to watch.
I'm on my lunch break, but my unit just got word earlier today that our unit is being dismantled, reassigned, whatever word you would like to use. And while I'm grateful that I still have a job, we have 3 options to choose from. One of the options will give me a 2-hour drive time, one way. Through all of this, everything that has been happening, transpiring in the last 45 days, I've known that stuff was coming down the pipeline. We've heard rumors, so on and so forth. And again, I'm thankful that I'm able to have a job, but a 2-hour one-way commute daily dramatically affects my life. And I do have small children, so it affects my household significantly. There will be no work-life balance at all with a 4-hour commute every day, 5 days a week. There will not be. So I don't know, like, everyone's just in a frenzy. People were contacting union reps, so on and so forth. But I have to make a decision soon as to what it is that I will do. I feel like in the last 45 days and everything that's been transpiring, I feel like I've been in it, but I haven't been in it, if that makes sense. Like, I've just kind of been trying to figure out what's going to happen next, because I haven't. But a friend of mine was telling me that, like, I did update my resume. My resume is updated, but I haven't, like, moved forward and actively been pursuing other positions. So I don't know. I have to make a decision whether or not I want to do a 4-hour commute every day while I have small kids, or what I'm going to do. So just a lunchtime chat update, filled with all of my anxiety and low-key depression, because I feel like all week I've been like battling with depression and the loom and gloom of what is now my everyday reality.
Big news just coming in. The Pentagon just released its plan to cut about 5 to 8% of civilian employees. Put in perspective, that is about 950,000 federal employees in total, with about 5,400 being the initial layoff. The acting Secretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, Daryl Selnick, has stated that these firings for these 5,400 could happen as soon as next week. This comes after earlier today, the Department of Defense was reported to say that they were stopping their plans for any mass firings until Pete Hegseth has done a thorough review of the impacts of these firings. Hegseth also posted on X yesterday saying that these targets are going to be lower performing employees, but a defense official said to CNN that the range of these firings are going to be broad, and said that the employees that are going to be fired are going to be ones that are not needed anymore, so no real set standard. I'll be posting more throughout the day. My social is going to be here. Follow for more updates throughout the day.
Let me read you this email. A reduction in force within your competitive area will be conducted effective April 23rd, 2025. This action is the result of restructuring the Office of Procurement Operations. It is with great regret that I must inform you that your position of Supervisory Contract Specialist is being abolished, and you have been reached for release in this reduction in force action. This memo constitutes a specific reduction in force notice. So I guess relocation doesn't matter because I'm fired.
Well, y'all, got an email today, not too long before I left, talking about the reduction in force process is about to start for my agency. We had a meeting prior to that, and then that email went out to all employees. For whatever reason, I don't know why they put in the email specifically talking about DEI. They're essentially about to wipe that whole fucking department within my agency. They're gonna leave like 15%. I wish I had signed a deferred resignation. I should have took a leap of faith and signed that shit. Because there was no mention in this email of a deferred resignation part 2 for our agency. Other agencies got it. There was no mention of it for my agency. My agency has been getting shat on through this whole process, not telling us anything. You punish the very people who bring in the money that allows this government to even function. What sense does that make? You firing people who will literally go after money owed that will help decrease the deficit. Like, if I could do a visual of the numbers of how much is going to be saved with all these firings versus the actual deficit, what the fuck are we doing? I guess I'm gonna have to ride this wave and cross my fingers. Hopefully it's a 60-day, not a 30-day, but the way they've been treating my agency, it's probably gonna be 30 days of fucking pay. Which is insanity. And the actual RIF is going to happen the day they bring back probationary employees for my agency. You're bringing these people back to do what? Fire them? Because that's what it's giving. That's what it's giving. That's what it's giving.
Well, HHS, which is the Health and Human Services, every single employee, I'm going to say it, every single employee, 80,000 received an email. Here's the joke, an unsigned email telling them, well, offering them the buyout. They're offering them $25,000. And they want to answer by next Friday. Now, y'all know this coming from Trump, Musk, the DOGE. And y'all know damn well they lying about that 25,000. That's why the email is unsigned. They're not even putting their names anymore on these signed emails anymore. They ain't doing that no more because they know they wrong. They know they wrong. They know they did not find any fraud. They didn't find any. Now they sending emails unsigned, telling people to take buyouts, $25,000. Who the fuck is gonna fall for that shit? Unsigned? Yeah, right. $25,000? Get the fuck out of here. They ain't giving y'all shit. They're trying to get some suckers to fall for that shit. But a lot of people are looking for other jobs because they don't want to be bothered with this shit. They don't want to be bothered with it. Okay? They feel like, you ain't going to stress my ass. You know? But don't y'all think it's mighty funny how all these emails are going out to every employee? And the emails now they're unsigned. So they can lie and say, we didn't send it, or we didn't send it. They're all full of shit. Y'all know it's coming from them. How they get every employee's name. They got every employee's name. Every single employee. 80,000 employees received this email. It's coming from the DOGE, you know, Trump and it's coming from them. But they don't want to sign their names to it, y'all. Because they know they're wrong. They know fucking well they're wrong. They know it.
This is an article from Axios, and the headline says, HHS begins laying off 10,000 employees. Entire offices throughout the Department of Health and Human Services were laid off Tuesday as the agency implemented DOGE-directed job cuts and Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s sweeping reorganization of the federal health bureaucracy. This renders me speechless because, like, this is what I mean when voting has consequences, right? Now you got Robert Kennedy, who is the head of, you know, Health and Human Services. Like, this motherfucker's trying to kill us, okay? Literally. Because they have cut things like Meals on Wheels for the elderly people. They have already cut like pediatric cancer research already. So like, or like funding for that, you know what I mean? But that's under the Treasury Department, I believe. But still, like this shit is like, I don't know why there isn't like more talk about this, because I mean obviously there's talk about it, but still, like, these kind of things are, like, these kind of cuts are gonna hurt the rest of us. The rest of us that are not fucking billionaires, like fucking white African Nazi Elon Musk, okay? We're not like him, right? So we don't have infinite money to protect ourselves, to insulate ourselves from getting sick or coming down with an illness. Like, this is why I hate billionaires, okay? And yes, I don't like billionaires. I would never wish to be a billionaire in a gazillion years, because they look like they're unhappy, one. And then two, they're always like they're always like, what are they doing? They're always projecting themselves in a weird fucking way. Look at Mark Zuckerberg, for example. He bought a shirt that an actor wore for the movie that he was, starring in. Like, this is just weird fucking behavior. Billionaires act weird as fuck. I'm sorry. They just do. They act like they don't have, like, a moral compass within themselves. Like, when I see a billionaire, I just see, like, a very like, vapid person that has, like, no personality whatsoever. And that's just my read on it, because, like, I think billionaires are weird. I'm sorry. Like, but yeah. But right now, they're fucking controlling who has a job or not. So, like, I'm disgusted. Like, these cuts are disgusting, and they're gonna hurt your average American person, and I'm like, that just makes me so infuriated, because for me personally, I work in the health sector, so this is gross. This is disgusting. This is shameful. It's all the things, all right? It's all the things.
A new round of mass job cuts is hitting the federal workforce today. The Trump administration is set to slash around 10,000 jobs across the agencies of the Department of Health and Human Services. HHS is massive, overseeing 13 agencies, including the Centers for Disease Control, the Food and Drug Administration, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and the National Institutes of Health. Some staff at the NIH office in Maryland lined up outside that building today, waiting to get inside and see if they were still employed there.
Way back home to my car at the train station, because I just stood in line only to find out that I just got let go from my job. So I have a lot of different thoughts right now, but I'm feeling I don't know. I wish I had something more exciting to say. I don't even know what to say right now.
Doors opening on the left.
It's why somebody will be like, "Did you get fired yet? Have you been impacted by everything? Have you been laid off? Why the fuck would you want me to lose my job and you know I got 4 kids? Why? Like, don't call to check on me and lead with that type of shit. Don't call my mama to check on me and lead with that type of shit. You can save all that negativity. This shit happening to the federal employees is real as fuck, and I don't need your negative, lingering ass spirits, your hating ass spirits. So if you an auntie, uncle, cousin, brother, sister, whomever, don't worry about me, sweetheart. Don't worry about me.
I've worked for the government for 17 years, municipal, not federal, but nonetheless, it is the public sector. And for the private sector folks that are hooting and hollering that the public sector folks are losing their jobs in the federal government, what do you think is going to happen? I don't know whether there's a misconception that federal workers are not qualified, they're all lazy, the government's just hiring anyone these days, they're DEI hire, whatever you might think. For the ones that are cheering, I hate to break it to you, but many federal workers are extremely qualified, if not overqualified for their positions, going to some of the top colleges, and they're choosing public service. They are choosing a job that might pay a little bit less than the private sector. Maybe there's more benefits. There used to be more security. There's not now. But these people are all going to be going on unemployment, which is also government assistance, which is going to be costing the government money, obviously only for a period of time. And then these very highly qualified, very intelligent workers, again, not everybody, but most, because just like in any jobs, there's going to be the bad apples. There's bad apples everywhere. But most of these people are highly qualified and highly educated. And then they're going to take all their skills and they're going to be going into the private sector, because why in the hell would you want to go back into the public sector? Now, again, not everybody, but most will probably now be competing for jobs in the private sector. And with what they were making in the government, like I can tell you right now, working for the municipal government, I have 2 bachelor's degrees and I have 2 master's degrees. I am absolutely overqualified for the position that I have as far as my education goes, and now my experience, given how long I've worked there. Given what I make, if I went private sector, I could easily take home 50, 60K more with a similar type of job. So now you're going to have all these people, highly qualified, highly educated, a lot of them, going into the private sector, probably willing to take slightly less money than you for the same job, because it's still going to be more money than they were making before. Most likely. Just throwing that out there. The misconception that the government's just hiring these quacks, and no.
Maybe I'm just not like well versed in the economy, but all these layoffs have to have some type of like huge ripple effect at some point in time. All these people not having an income, all these people not having a salary, firing all these people, all these federal workers who probably make good money. This has to have some type of negative impact that's going to start some domino effect and then affect, the businesses around that area, because now the people there don't make any money. So then now those businesses don't make money. I don't know. Maybe I'm just spitballing, but I feel like this is not going to be good for the communities where these people that are getting laid off live. If I live in an area close to DC, and I run a business and a lot of my clients work in DC, they're federal workers, what am I going to do since none of them have money? Like Mary and her husband Tom were federal workers, and they used to come in and get breakfast from my bagel shop every morning before they went to work. Now that they got laid off, they're going to be trying to save every dollar, every penny. So what does that mean for me? That means nobody's going to be spending money at my shit. See, and it's going to have like a long effect. Like all these people think it's not going to affect them. And it's crazy. It's going to have a long ripple effect. I can feel it now. If it's not, again, maybe I'm just not well versed in the economy. But I really feel like a lot of this stuff is going to start having an effect on others that are not like directly associated with the government.
Hey there, everybody. So things continue to change on the daily. It appears that the Health and Human Services and their Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., has sent an email to all 80,000 HHS employees offering them a voluntary $25,000 buyout. So while I appreciate the approach that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has taken in terms of trying to downsize the federal government, offering a reasonable buyout for employees to take, which is much, much better than the alternative, which we've seen from Elon Musk and DOGE, where they just send out emails terminating people with no notice, giving them 15 minutes to clear their personal belongings out of their office. So this is a much more reasonable approach to downsizing the federal government. I believe back in the 90s, whenever President Bill Clinton worked directly with Congress over a 3-year period to downsize the government, that they too also offered a $25,000 buyout to federal employees at that time. So, but my position is this: how is this buyout going to possibly negatively affect Indian country? Why? Because the Indian Health Service falls directly under the Health and Human Services. So we in Indian country already know that there is always a shortage of doctors, nurses, pharmacists, dentists, optometrists, LPNs. The list goes on and on. Not to mention, IHS is already way underfunded than what any other healthcare agencies are. So if this buyout is also being offered to keep personnel like doctors and dentists and optometrists and nurses and LPNs, that's going to have a dramatic effect on those tribes that are still directly serviced by the Indian Health Service. And I say directly serviced because we know that a lot of tribes have compacted with the federal government where they have taken over the health services from the federal government. An example is Chickasaw Nation, Choctaw Nation here in Oklahoma, Cherokee Nation. A lot of tribes here in Oklahoma have 638 and have become what they call self-governance or compacted tribes. However, there's a lot of tribes, like my tribe, the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes, I believe every tribe in western Oklahoma, that are still direct service tribes where the federal government, Indian Health Service, runs the clinics for the native people that are in those areas. So if this buyout is potentially offered to those individuals, it is going to negatively impact the amount of services and the level of services that are already hampered here in Indian country. I understand that a lot of other agencies around the country, not just here in Oklahoma, are also being negatively affected by the closing of the federal leases that many of these agencies currently have. I saw that list that came out the other day. I want to say there was 15 Indian Health Service facilities that are being targeted to be closed by DOGE and Elon Musk. One of them is the Gallup Indian Hospital, which is a very large facility out there in New Mexico. So I'm not sure whether their senators there, their governor there, their congressmen are going to be advocating for to keep that facility open, as well as some of the other facilities around the country. I know up north in Minnesota, the senators there, Tina Stevens, Amy Klobuchar, are advocating to keep the Bemidji area office open, which I mentioned this the other day. But that area office services 3 big tribes right there in Minnesota because they're still direct service tribes. And if you don't have people there to provide the services, particularly those, it's what's called residual services. It's services that tribes cannot contract from the federal government because only the federal government can carry out those services. An example of some of those would be like the financial management, the contract services. So we've got to look at that. We've got to look at the impact that this is going to have. Again, is this a subtle way of trying to terminate the federal government's trust responsibility to Indian tribes? Again, like I said, I like the approach that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has taken here. He's at least given the federal employees an opportunity to take a $25,000 buyout. Everybody knows that doctors, dentists, optometrists, nurses, LPNs that work for the federal government can make a lot more money in the private sector. A lot of them do it simply because they feel like they have a civil service or civil duty to work for the federal government or public service. But if that offer is going to be made to them, I suspect that many of them are going to take it because those individuals will have no problem finding jobs in the private sector. So I'll continue to keep everybody updated. If you like what you hear and see, give me a like and a follow. I'll continue to keep everybody updated. Ho-ho.
I got laid off today, y'all. Oh, hump day is crazy. Y'all could have did this shit on Monday.
I didn't think it would get to this point, I guess. I'm a federal employee, a remote federal employee at that. I moved with my husband because of military orders about a year and a half ago, and he got out and got his first, federal civilian job. So he's a probationary federal employee, and we are both scrambling to figure things out so that hopefully our 3-year-old's life doesn't have to completely change and we can support the baby that I have on the way in 2 months. I don't even know how to feel right now. I mean, I just watched a video of someone saying that a federal employee just offed themselves because of this whole situation, because they lost their job. It sucks. I don't know if I'm going to have health care when I go to have this baby in a couple months. I don't know if I can pay my mortgage in a couple months, you know. We have no clue what's going to happen. I'm scared. I worked my butt off to be in the position that I'm in right now. For context, I worked at McDonald's while my husband was active duty because I couldn't get a job in 2020 when I graduated and COVID hit. So I worked at McDonald's to pay our rent at the time. And the job that I'm at now is the job that gave me my first big break 4 years ago. And I've put everything I have into it. I've climbed the ladder. And this is what it comes to.
I lost my job offer this week as a doctor due to recent state and federal budget cuts, and I've had several other doctors reach out to me saying the same thing happened to them. I'm not posting this to create panic, but I just want to share this because everything we do is political and politics affect us all. And if you're a person who's not political, this is maybe your sign to get political, because we are losing doctors and we're losing job offers because of the recent administration. I also want to share that I support anyone who's going through a similar thing, and we'll be okay, but we're just headed to scary times.
Some of you know already, Elon and like DOGE or whatever fired 2,000 people from the National Institute of Health on Friday, and tomorrow we're going to find out who they're firing from the hospital. I'm currently at the NIH hospital receiving treatment, and it's just like, what kind of person fires staff that's caring for cancer and transplant patients? I don't know, pretty sick and pretty cruel. You can cut the tension in here with a knife. These nurses are scared for their jobs and their families, and these nurses have become like family to me, and I'm worried about my treatment. Will I be able to finish my treatment? Just so many questions, and we have to stop pretending that this isn't happening, and we need to be more vocal, because this is just the first wave of their plan.
So we got an update today that Department of Ed is going to be going through a mass firing of half of all of its staff, basically effective tomorrow. The staff at Department of Ed was told in no uncertain terms, do not show up to work on March 12th, tomorrow, Wednesday. And at the time I recorded this, right? And so what is that going to mean? Half of all staff at Department of Ed getting fired, basically. What does that mean for borrowers? What does that mean for your loans, etc., right? So they are centralizing Department of Ed. They're getting rid of all these satellite locations, right, around the country. They're consolidating everything at the main office building in D.C. Presumably that's to exert more control over Department of Ed, probably, right, to have it all centralized in that one spot. They are claiming that federal student aid will not be affected by this. I think that that is not true, probably. If you really just think about what it means, we lay off half of the staff of Department of Ed. It will mean slower forgiveness. It will mean slower application processing. It will mean confused guidance being sent to the student loan servicers as to how much credit borrowers should have. Obviously, the Biden administration did this massive IDR account adjustment update to all of the systems, promising borrowers all this credit from the program that they issued through an executive action. But if there's nobody left at Department of Ed to actually implement it, you're going to have to be your own best advocate. You're going to have to be the person to identify how much credit you actually should have towards forgiveness. Now, the Biden administration promised everybody a bunch of credit and went out the door at the last second and updated everybody's accounts with the amount of credit that people should have. And I don't think that there's a reason to distrust the payment count trackers that they created at the last moment. But the problem is a lot of those payment count trackers are in some ways incorrect. If I've looked at several of them and, basically, some of them are right. Some of them are way overstating how much forgiveness credit people would have under the IDR waiver. Some of them are understating it. And why? Because they did it all at the last second, because they didn't think they would lose. And then when they did, they didn't have a plan to do the IDR account adjustment updates until the very last second, and they rushed something out the door to try to lock in, what they promised to people when they have really no power to do that, right? So with the Trump administration coming in and axing half of Department of Ed's staff, I would anticipate, first of all, getting the IDR application and the consolidation online applications back up might take a heck of a lot longer now, right? Because you have, if you're eliminating half of everybody's jobs, like it's going to be a lot harder to get those functions restored again. And Department of Ed usually is the one that issues all of the guidances to the servicers as to what to do with borrower files. So Ed will typically send a mass, data file with all the different, individuals to forgive with different types of, discharges, right, for different reasons, PSLF, 2025-year forgiveness, et cetera, right? So if there are not a lot of people in that office doing those discharge, file dumps on the servicers are just going to be sitting on loans for a lot longer than they should be. And, this is a, initial step. This is a first step as to what the plans are that they have for Department of Ed. But, people might attack me for saying it, but statutes are still statutes. In terms of shutting down these branch locations, they haven't shut down the entire thing yet. They're cutting half of it. And notice that they're not cutting all of it. You might say, well, they're cutting half of it. That's a pretty big freaking deal, Travis. And yeah, I understand. But, I will say this. Notice that it is not all of it. If you look at other departments that they've really killed off, like USAID, they didn't keep very much of it. They only kept 15% of it, and they moved it under the State Department. Department of Ed, maybe this is what they're essentially doing. They're keeping half of Department of Ed instead of cutting all of it, even though they'd love to cut all of it. They can't probably, right, because of statute. So this is their in-between option. So, we're just going to we have to continue to wait. I just want to try to uplift the borrowers during this time where a lot of people are just exhausted about student loans. And what I would suggest is just wait. You have no other choice but to wait. Wait until the chaos settles down. At some point it will, right? At some point, if we're sent into a recession, that's going to modify some of the things that the administration does. It's just kind of how it works, right? A new administration comes in, first 100 days, they feel like they have the mandate of all mandates, they get a lot of stuff done, and then things grind to a halt. Things massively slow down in terms of the changes that are occurring, and then effectively you come to gridlock for the last 2 or 3 years of an administration. So, I think that people should be not incredibly worried right now. I think that you just need to be aware that it's something to pay attention to. It's something to be ready to apply on your own if you have to via like a paper application. And we're just going to have to continue to monitor it for you. But just know you're going to see a lot of headlines this week. A lot of people are going to see, lots of probably interviews of Department of Ed staff laid off. And, a couple other people are saying, yeah, this is rough. I'm still benefiting from the same interest forbearance though, but I'm scared about making higher payments under the standard plan. I think that the interest freeze on the SAVE plan is not long for this world. I think everybody needs to be ready for that to be not long for this world. Probably I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the month the SAVE interest forbearance was dead. So people just need to be ready. You need to be paying attention to how you're filing your taxes this year. You want to be paying attention to what your AGI is going to be to make sure you'll still have a partial financial hardship, which means you'll be able to sign up for IBR just in case. And of course, we'll follow all this for you. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. Thanks so much for following Student Loan Planner.
Yesterday, the Department of Education laid off over 1,300 employees, nearly half their workforce. This isn't just about jobs, it's about your child's educational rights and services. The important thing to note here is that when the Secretary of the Department of Education says that this is the Department of Ed's final mission, she's talking about dismantling the very system that enforces special education rights and protections. The immediate impact that we see from these cuts is the fact that the cuts aren't just random. They're eliminating staff who oversee critical programs, including special education compliance, civil rights enforcement, and federal funding distribution. Think about it this way. Who ensures that your child's IEP or 504 plan is followed when there's no one to enforce these rights? The claim is that the department will continue to deliver all statutory programs, but here's the reality. With half the workforce gone, 6 regional offices closing, and the consolidation of the oversight departments, there's no way to maintain the current level of protection and support. They're not just reducing staff, they're reducing their ability to protect your child's educational rights. I always try and drive home the impact to you as parents. Without federal oversight and enforcements, schools may begin to interpret disability rights differently. Federal funding could be delayed or disrupted, civil rights complaints might go uninvestigated, and special education monitoring could become inconsistent. This isn't just about making sure the department is efficient. What's happening is essentially eliminating protections that took decades to establish.
All right, it's official. I am being laid off. Just received my preliminary reduction in force notice that I am, what's the word? Notice of recommendation not to reemploy for 2025-2026. You are receiving this notice either because you serve in a particular kind of service that is being reduced or eliminated. So, can someone please just explain to me how the teacher of the year gets laid off? And yes, I am upset. But I think I'm so angry right now that it's going to take me some time to sift through these emotions. I love my students. I always will. That's it.
1,300 teachers are going to be fired in Ohio. 60 teachers were just fired in Reynoldsburg, where my cousin works. He was just let go. Like, he loves his job. He teaches earth science. Seeing in real time, like, the gutting of education in America it's not only devastating, but we should be very scared. People are saying they want to integrate AI into grades as early as kindergarten. Like, you grow neural pathways, critical thinking skills by having to have deductive and inductive reasoning, by having to figure things out. Like, where are these teachers going to go? Who are they going to teach? I grew up near Parma, Ohio. When my sister was going to school, their levies didn't pass so often that the kids only had math, science, social studies, and English, and then they would go home. They had no buses, they had no lunch, they had no after school, anything. And then because of that, like, none of them could really go to school after because you didn't have the resume. So, I don't know.
Apparently tomorrow, DOGE is going to descend on the FDIC. Now, I want to remind you what the FDIC does. The FDIC was created to stop bank runs and ensure that if you have money in the bank has your money. If you have up to $250,000 in the bank, the FDIC ensures that that money is there for you. No matter what that bank does, you are going to get your cash. You are going to have that ability to take out that money. If the FDIC is messed with, mind you, Project 2025 did not necessarily call for FDIC's removal. What it called for was for the FDIC to be merged in with other institutions. And the effects of that are kind of amorphous. We're not really sure what that could lead to. Could it lead to the regulations being changed? Could it lead to things being removed? Could the number that we're having insured in the bank be changed because of this? We don't know, because it's such a key piece of banking regulation that most leading economists have agreed is like one of the best things we've ever done to help stabilize the economy through crazy volatile times, that just messing with it is just out of the norm and something that these people have not even guesstimated what it could do. So yeah, that's where we're at.
Yeah, I was just ranting about that in a different response to somebody that said that this is what we voted for. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, they even eliminated the people that make the NOSH masks last week. That whole department has been dismantled. So if you work in like concrete bagging or any industry that like lays concrete, the incidences of silicosis are going to go through the freaking roof, because concrete's full of silica. It's not something that you want to breathe in. And if NOSH isn't around like yelling about it, and OSHA isn't like around saying, hey, these guys need to wear masks, the rates are just going to just explode. And there's several other kind of severe respiratory disorders that you can get, like working in a mill, working with wood, working with MDF, working with drywall. I used to work at Home Depot, and I used to yell at my associates that worked in lumber and building materials, hey, you guys need a mask, when they were bagging and, loading concrete, because the bags suck and the stuff blows everywhere. I think even in Virginia, we had like 10 incidences of Home Depot associates getting silicosis because they just didn't wear a mask, because OSHA didn't come around and make sure that it was a priority, and it was something that Home Depot made mandatory, because Home Depot didn't.
I think that most large corporations have several safety programs in place because they don't want to have to deal with the repercussions of somebody getting injured. I think that like any kind of associate injury at Home Depot, if it's not reported to the state, they get a fine of like $15,000. But from what I understand, that's all going to go away as well. So responsibility for making sure that those kind of things are taken care of is no longer going to be something that's going to be happening. But the elimination of OSHA, so many people are talking about how great that'll be because how hard it makes for them to work and how ridiculous they are. Doesn't understand that in terms of a factory job, they're vitally important to the safety of the people working there. It's gonna suck. It's just gonna suck.
Terrifying news, TikTok. The CDC has just laid off all personnel responsible for performing ship inspections on cruise ships in and out of U.S. ports. 2 times a year, the CDC would board cruise ships, spot inspections, no warning, and look at things like potable water sources, the medical center, how food is prepared and stored, the kids club, and then rate the cruise lines and force them to immediately repair or replace those things to keep passengers safe. Well, that's not going to happen anymore. In addition, CDC has an outbreak response team that monitors outbreaks. So far, there's been a dozen this year, and it's only April. That's not going to happen anymore. Instead, cruise lines are going to have to be self-policing. And as a lawyer who sues cruise lines for a living, I wouldn't trust Carnival, Royal Caribbean, or other cruise lines to be in charge of protecting passenger safety. That's something that the CDC has done for decades. Well, no more.
Well, that's it. They gutted the CDC, National Center for Injury Prevention, and the Violence Prevention Branch, which are what fund my research. This is my whole career that I was working for, and it's gone. It's gone. I don't even know what to say.
So, I received a lot of comments to this effect about immigrating to another country or doing the work in some other context. And I just want to explain something about the field of injury epidemiology. So, epidemiology as a intellectual field has its roots in America. Like, we have a really strong epidemiology research base in America, a lot of great epidemiology thinkers, a lot of epidemiologic advancement centered in the country. It's something that we have been really, really good at. We have some of the best programs in the world, and that is difficult to go on with without federal funding at all. But when it comes to injury epidemiology, you know, the reason that it can exist is because we have so much epidemiology research that people can apply it to smaller problems. Smaller in terms of that it affects less people compared to, say, cardiovascular disease or influenza or HIV, right? So we're able to apply it to smaller problems like injury and violence. And also, these are causes of death that don't behave like other causes of death in terms of like routes of infection and chronic disease progression and things like that. And so injury epidemiology has quirks. The models that we use are different, the methods that we use are different, and all of that is really centered in the United States because we have so much capacity, and also it is funded through the CDC Injury Prevention Research Centers. So the federal supports these institutional centers. I work at one of the institutional centers that are in the United States, and states that do injury prevention work, it's rare. Some of them do it though, and those are funded through the CDC federal avenue. There is not much capacity for injury and violence epidemiology research outside of that federal institution. Like, the reason that we can do this research is because of that federal institution, and so that is gone. And that is just it's really hard to imagine this as a viable career without the primary global mechanism for injury prevention epidemiology research no longer existing, right? And then you add on top of that I I'm not just specialized in injury and violence epidemiology, but I'm specifically specialized in the American carceral system and its relationship with American patterns of violence. Like, I am so specialized. And so then when it comes to applying for jobs outside of the country, which I am doing and have been doing, you know, like, I am baseline not qualified for a lot of stuff because I haven't specialized in the kinds of methods that are common for more general population health research, or for chronic disease research, which is much more common, or infectious disease research, which is also much more common. And so in order to pivot, I would have to retrain. Which, like, sure, maybe I can retrain. I would not like to retrain. I really like what I do. And so I just want to explain, like, why the loss of the Injury Prevention Center is such a blow to, like, my career. It's not just this job, it is the career. I don't know how it proceeds without that center. So I keep trying, but, you know, it's like, it's hard to market myself. Like, hey, I'm specialized in something that you historically don't study. I don't know if I can help you with diabetes. I don't know. Probably with a little bit of time, but they can hire someone who could do it immediately. So that's it. It's not just about me, though. It's about, you know, research about gun violence prevention, gone. Research about intimate partner violence prevention, gone. Like, the population level research about these things, toast. I don't know. I personally think it's important to reduce homicide. And I think so do the people who voted for the administration that have done this. They also care about reducing homicide, but they don't understand that in order for the research to get done to help figure out how to prevent it, like, you gotta pay money.
Hey, yeah, on that note, do you want to see what happened to CoreCivic stock? CoreCivic used to be called the Corrections Corporation of America and is a prison industrial complex industry. Here you go. Here's how happy it was about Donald Trump's election. So think about why that might be.
I went on a date with a guy the other night and it was kind of a wash. I'm a good time, so I have a good time wherever I go, but he wasn't really bringing much to the situation. And then we get to the end of the date and he tells me who he voted for and why he voted for him. And I was like, I'm going to be honest with you, that's it's kind of a non-starter for me. And I went about my life. And he texted me this morning and he told me, I saw that you took a step back when I told you why I was hoping he would win. And I just want to tell you, I got some news that is really exciting for me, that there's a company that I partner with and they've got a contract, but the contract only goes through if Donald Trump wins. What is this contract, you might ask, that only goes through if Donald Trump wins? Well, this contract is a series of immigration camps that's going to be built in South Texas. And I went, oh, immigration camps. And he said, you know, for vetting and processing immigrants. And I said, oh, that doesn't sound great. And he said, well, I don't really have to like work there, right? I'm just like partnered with the company. So it's like life-changing money for me to partner with this company that's going to build immigration camps in South Texas. And I went, that's not really helping your case any. And he's like, well, I don't have to work there. Yuck. Yuck. And I went, well, you're helping to create it. Like, doesn't that make you feel bad? And he's like, no, I'm helping to protect people. I'm providing like the protection for the immigrants. And I'm like, do you mean the guards? Do you mean the guards at the concentration camps? Is that what you mean? Anyway, I feel like dating as a woman in Florida is really just subjecting yourself to torture no one should have to endure.
Ooh, it ought to be a crime. He ain't no friend of mine. Fuck that guy.
I think my law firm's about to make a deal with Trump, and I need to now decide if I'm going to walk away from over $300,000 a year or if I'm going to stand here spineless.
AmeriCorps is the latest government agency to face major cuts. More than 2,000 people ages 18 to 26 served for nearly a year, according to the program's website, responding to natural disasters and helping with community projects across the United States. Volunteers were informed this week that their work would end early due to, quote, circumstances beyond their control, according to an email obtained by the Associated Press.
I did not realize that getting laid off from my job was going to give me PTSD. It took me until starting my new job to realize, because this new job is literally giving me like a trauma response. Here's the thing, when I was laid off from my previous job, it came out of nowhere for me. Like, it was a complete shock, but I never even considered that PTSD could be an option, because once I got over the initial shock and panic of getting laid off, like, I think I handled it really well. Like, I had a very good financial plan. I started applying to jobs. I started posting on here, which obviously is like giving me a lot of great benefits. Not to mention, I'll just say, I don't think I was treated very well at my previous role. And so like, I kind of was like, oh, you know, maybe it's not the worst thing. But now at my new job, I have a crippling paranoia and constant anxiety that I could lose my job at any second. Like, for example, at the beginning of this week, my boss hadn't responded to a few of my messages, and I was like, oh my God, this is it. And then the next day, like, I checked in with her again, and she was like, oh, sorry for the delayed responses. Someone is out this week, so it's been super chaotic. And I was like, okay, why was I so worried? And the most frustrating thing about it is that the new job and my boss have given me absolutely no reason to be so paranoid. Like, so far, I actually really like my boss, which is like kind of a rare thing. Like, people liking their boss, that's low-key unheard of. I just think the shock of getting laid off made me realize that you could think everything is going totally fine when in reality it's not, and there's no way for you to know that. So now I'm just left with this involuntary, illogical paranoia at all times. So if anyone has tips on how to deal with this, let me know. That would be much appreciated.